Hello, and welcome to a series of special podcasts. My name is Jennifer Davidson, and I am the chair of the Writers Guild of Ireland. In 2024, we were honoured to host the World Conference of Screenwriters, an international gathering of writers and writers' guilds from all around the world, for 2 days of lively debate and discussion about the issues that affect our craft and our livelihoods, with members of the International Affiliation of Writers Guilds and the Federation of Screenwriters in Europe. We are delighted to partner with Film Ireland to be able to bring you these recordings from the conference. As the Writers Guild of Ireland celebrated our Emerald anniversary in 2024, the conference began with an Irish retrospective, bringing together a panel of some of the key players from the Writers Guild of Ireland's history for a lively discussion on the Guild's origins, the long austerity years, and the current writer climate. Thank you for listening.
The Apollo 11 astronauts. Guy in the middle, Michael Collins, hero of the Irish War of Independence. On either side is Buzz Lightyear, Neil Diamond, who brought us such classics as Sweet Caroline and, of course, Cracklin' Rosie. And hand in hand, they took that small step onto the lunar surface to the majestic sound of that music, which is called 2001: A Space Odyssey, and was written by Stanley Kubrick. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the north of Ireland, Derry, the Battle of the Bogside. When there are people battering at your door to come in and hurt you, and you call the police, and then you realize the people battering at your door to come in and hurt you are the police, steps have to be taken. This is me. So what have we learned? Well, that the people with the PowerPoint and the power can make up whatever the hell they like. And some of you will believe it. Some of you won't. Some of you won't know whether to believe it or not. And some of you will say, well, hell, there's no such thing as truth anymore anyway. And the people with power will take advantage of your confusion and disarray to screw you over. So you need to know who's telling you the truth. You need to know who shares your ideals and your goals and your struggle. And you need to know who, when steps have to be taken, will step out in solidarity with you. You need to know who to trust. So, yes, the Apollo 11 astronauts. Yes, indeed, Michael Collins. But this is Buzz Aldrin, and the other guy is Neil Armstrong. This is not Stanley Kubrick. This is Rasputin. Yeah, good. You know your monks. This is Stanley Kubrick, but he did not write that music, which is not called 2001: A Space Odyssey. It is called Also Sprach Zarathustra and was written by Richard Strauss. And this is indeed the Battle of Bogside. This is not me. I'm not from Derry. I'm from Belfast. I never had a gas mask, though there were times gas mask would have come in handy. And this is us here now. This is the World Conference of Screenwriters. We are the Writers Guild of Ireland. We're delighted to be your hosts. We're delighted that you're here, and we will tell you the truth. Because guilds are writers. So we know your goals and your struggles and your ideals. And we will stand with you. If you need to step out, we will be beside you in solidarity. We will tell you the truth. You can trust us. From now on, everything I say will be true. What do you get when you kiss a guy? You get enough germs to catch pneumonia, and after you do, he'll never phone you. I'll never fall in love again. Thank you. Bear that in mind. 1969, apparently this is an Irish film. I looked it up. This is classed as an Irish film. This was released in 1969. As you can see, it's Sinful Davy, and it was written by James R. Webb. Big song that year was, take a wild guess, I'll never fall in love again. Thank you. Written by Burt Bacharach and Hal David, and sung by the fabulous Bobby Gentry. That song was top of the charts on the 27th of October, 1969. And on the 27th of October, 1969, the Irish Authors Association was founded by John O'Donovan, M.J. Molloy, Morris Davin Power, James Douglas, and Michael Judge. After a few days, the name of the organization was changed to the Society of Irish Playwrights. No one is really sure why, but given that John O'Donovan, M.J. Molloy, Morris Davin Power, James Douglas, and Michael Judge were Irish playwrights, we can take a wild guess. This is John Lynch, who was chair of the Society of Irish Playwrights from 1986 until 1998. He is still fighting on behalf of writers. He is still on the board of the Guild. Would you welcome, please, John Lynch?
Thanks, Thomas. Thanks very much. Thank you. How do I follow that? I can't sing, I can't dance, and this guy is just wonderful. You know, he's cheered you all up, which is very good. I'm going to bring you all down now. I'm going to talk about the wonderful people who set up the Society of Irish Playwrights and how it came to be the Writers' Guild of Ireland, okay? We'll go back to, you mentioned 1969. In the old days, getting a play on wasn't easy, but it was simple. You'd send your play off to a theatre, and if they read it or didn't lose it, they might decide to put it on. The production would be cast, designed, and marketed largely without your input. And if the director felt like it, you might attend a reading or a read-through. After it opened, you got some money in the form of a percentage of the box office, and that was it. But from the 1960s onwards, that began to change. In Ireland, the Society of Irish Playwrights, SIP, now WGI, the Writers' Guild of Ireland, was established, and agreements were negotiated on behalf of playwrights. This coincided with the tax exemption for Irish resident artists on all artistic work in 1969. It was the brainchild of Anthony Cronin, a writer and advisor to the government, and the establishment of the Society of Irish Playwrights by 5 prominent playwrights mentioned by Thomas earlier, John O'Donovan, James Douglas, Michael J. Molloy, Morris Davin Power, and Michael Judge on October 27, 1969. John O'Donovan was chair of SIP, and some years later, when I had a little success with some plays on stage and radio, he invited me to become a member. By then, the membership had increased, and I found myself in the company of many great and successful writers for stage, screen, and radio, most of whom had achieved recognition at home and abroad. The membership included John B. Keane, Carolyn Swift, Margaretta Darcy, John Arden, James McKenna, Tom Murphy, screenwriters Michael Judge, James Douglas, Wesley Burroughs, best-selling authors James Plunkett and later Maeve Binchy, biographer Ulick O'Connor, and playwright Hugh Leonard, who had just won a Tony Award on Broadway. They were an odd bunch. They didn't necessarily like each other, but they had a clear purpose and they got the work done because playwrights had become organised and militant. The society had by now achieved union status by affiliation with the Irish Actors' Equity and became the negotiation body for playwrights in Ireland. And RTE, which you will hear about later from Sean later on, the national public broadcaster of television and radio, they got a terrible shock when in 1972 they were taken to the Labour Court by the Society, who won the right to negotiate rates of pay with retrospection for screen and radio. The poor bureaucrats were not used to these strange and weird characters thumping the table and demanding their rights. This was unheard of. Now, following this victory, the Society went from strength to strength. They continually renegotiated contracts from radio and television. And the writers' contract at our National Theatre, the Abbey, negotiated for over a year by the Society in 1972, is still used to this very day. It gave status, power, and above all, a degree of respect to the writer for the first time in this country. Writers' agreements gave playwrights an upfront commission fee or an option fee if the play wasn't commissioned, as well as a royalty. It guaranteed the playwright the right to approve or prevent any changes to their script, to be consulted over the choice of directors and actors, casting, marketing, and to attend rehearsals. As well as money, contracts, and credits, the nuts and bolts of the writing life, SIP also engaged in the creative and craft side of things. They produced and published plays and organised rehearsed readings, courses on writing for stage, screen, and radio, as well as doing agency work on behalf of members. Now, all of this was achieved by the unselfish work of its members, and particularly by the board, which included many radical thinkers with little regard for convention, who were unpaid and had no office or secretarial help. Only a handful were full-time writers, and the rest kept their day jobs as journalists, painters, teachers, or gas company workers. They held meetings in their own houses or wherever they could get a room. They achieved so much with no money at all, and were conflicted when the Arts Council, after 12 years, offered to fund a share in an office and a secretary with the Irish Composers Organisation. The writers enjoyed their freedom, and many were against accepting this offer of money from a government organisation that they, as artists and outsiders, had little regard for. The great playwright John Norton, who was well known for his radical views, he spoke against the idea of the artist taking money from the government. And many writers agreed with him. And they felt that their freedom, from taking this money from a government organisation that they, as artists and outsiders, had little regard for, would not be a good idea. Many agreed with John Arden and expressed the fear of losing their freedom as artists and being culled by politicians with money. Following long debate and argument, it was reluctantly agreed to accept the offer for the practical reason stressed by John O'Donovan to ensure continuity and survival by establishing a more professional organisation in the knowledge that the Society of Irish Playwrights now had proven friends in the trade union movement who would stand by the writer as it had since its foundation. So, having struggled for 12 years, from 1969 to 1981, on the goodwill of its members with no financial support whatever, the Society was officially recognised by the establishment and became the first representative organisation for writers in Irish history, with half an office and half a secretary, in 1981. Most of the heavy lifting had been done due to the great leadership of the late John O'Donovan, Michael Judge, and James Douglas. I became chair in the middle 1980s, following on from Michael Judge, with whom I negotiated the setting up of the Irish Writers' Centre, with the help of a £100,000 grant from the Irish government in 1991. The Society had joined the European Writers' Congress, and we attended each congress in many European countries, including a major congress that we organised in Ireland, in Dublin. Michael was elected to the board and wrote and edited the text of a major publication on the lesser used languages of Europe and their literature for Forum Europa in Luxembourg, September 1992. He was a dear friend and a great colleague. Someone else who had a great influence on the work of the Society of Irish Playwrights, and indeed the Writers' Guild of Ireland, was O.Z. Whitehead, affectionately known as Zebby. He was an American actor who lived in Dublin from 1963 and spent a large amount of his own money on encouraging new writing through the O.Z. Whitehead Award. He was a great encouragement to me, and here's how I came to meet him. Zebby was a tall, thin, gangly, sandy-haired 65-year-old American gentleman who rose from his seat and to a hushed audience at the Dublin Arts Festival announced, "The winner of the O.Z. Whitehead Award for New Writing, 1976, for his wonderful play, Poor Old Joe, is John Lynch." All right. Yeah. He looked around, but he couldn't see me, as I wasn't there. Trouble is, the committee had forgot to invite me. And poor Zebby, he couldn't stop apologizing, but he invited me to dinner on the following day. And I developed a warm friendship with Zebby for the following 22 years of his life, and I know that he would be delighted that we have continued his work as he is commemorated each year in our annual awards to writers, the Zebby Awards. In 2007, the first year of the Zebby Awards, the award for service to the writer went to Anthony Cronin, the writer who created the tax exemption for writers, for artists, all artists, not just writers and painters and all that. And in 2015, I had the great honor of presenting this award to the late Michael Judge and James Douglas, for they were the only remaining founders of the Society of Irish Playwrights, for their service to the writer. We have been given service to the writer since 1969. That's, as Jennifer and Thomas told you, that's 55 years. And even though it's our green emerald year, writers are not so green anymore, glad to say. Thanks to the great support we have received from Screen Ireland, the Arts Council, Irish Actors Equity, SIP2 Commission de Mon, and the Writers Guild of America over many years. And to conclude, here's a little phrase that we sometimes use at the end of our meetings. And this is it. Today, but not just today, each and every day between now and the next time we meet, don't forget, strength in numbers, strength in camaraderie, in your guild, in yourselves. And please, unashamedly, enthusiastically, and deservedly, give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Society of Irish Playwrights, that's where we started. How cool. 2001. 2001, an Irish film released that year, and this really was an Irish film, no messing. Disco Pigs. Yeah, good film. Written by Enda Walsh, and incidentally featuring the screen debut of a young Irish actor called Cillian Murphy, who apparently is kind of making a go of this whole acting business. Good man, Cillian. Mama died down in old Moulin Rouge. Big song that year. Lady Marmalade, the remake. Written by Kenny Nolan and Bob Crewe, and sung by Christina Aguilera, Lil Kim, Maya, Missy Elliott, and Kiefer Sutherland. Sorry, pink. It's an easy mistake to make. 2001 was also the year that the Society of Irish Playwrights became the Irish Playwrights and Screenwriters Guild. The word guild appears in our name. All right. This is Sean Moffatt, the first chair of the Irish Playwrights and Screenwriters Guild. Please welcome Sean Moffatt.
Thanks very much, Tom. Thank you. Oh, geez, I feel like leaving now. I really do. This is this wonderful story of yours and Tom's amazing presentation. I've got nothing like that to offer here. First of all, thank you for inviting me here tonight. It is amazing because so many years have passed. I don't write anymore, so I'm actually an outsider here tonight. I teach script writing, and I love it, and I love doing it. And I try to inspire writers as much as I can, and I talk about the Guild a fair bit. But I had laid to rest the ghosts of what I had contributed, because unlike John, I certainly hadn't the stamina to continue with the work that we did back then. Let me kind of do it filmically, if I can, and move backward and forward a little bit in giving an account of some of the stuff, because I don't want to give a history lesson or anything like that here. First of all, we jump forward to, I think it was 2000, and I found myself, to my amazement, sitting in New Zealand at a conference for the WGI, and I walked into a room which probably had nearly as many people as are here tonight, not expecting that. They paid for my flight. I thought, wow, that's fantastic. I wasn't expecting that, and it was in a fabulous hotel. And then they asked me to give an account of, at that point it was SIP, and or had we changed it? I think we changed it at that point to the Guild. But anyway, I then proceeded to tell them a story, and I'm going to tell you that story, and then maybe we'll come back to how they responded. The story was of this kind of, and by the way, disclaimer here, some of this or all of it might be true. Memory being what it is. There was this upstart, which was myself, who didn't appreciate anything of the amazing names that John has given us about the Society of Irish Playwrights, because I had having worked in radio for a little while, got this amazing job working on soap. I tended then, not so much now, to make enemies of people a lot. I do tend to, scream and shout, and I'm a bit of a firebrand. Anybody who knows me here probably made enemies with me at some point. So there were things I wasn't happy with as a writer, and twice during the early years of Fair City, I found myself without a job because I didn't agree with what they were doing and what was happening. And I know I turned to Society of Irish Playwrights, who had somehow roped me in to negotiate, and probably they saw that I would scare the shit out of producers and maybe get some more money for writers, which seemed to happen all right for radio. But I had no idea. I had no knowledge of protocols, of committees or anything like that. I just would sit down and say, give me more money, I deserve it. But we always had Jerry Brown with us, one of the ATGW, the union as it was there, to actually do the proper articulation and get the paperwork done. But when it came to TV and I screamed and shouted, I did contact Society of Irish Playwrights as it was, with my complaints, and likewise, probably rightly, they said, that's your man again, he's giving out too bloody much all the time. You've got a job. Do you know how good this is? And that pretty much is what was intimated to me. What are you complaining about? So I talked to somebody who was involved in the Congress of Trade Unions and said, look, I'm frustrated here. John has kind of, I think towards the latter years before I came on the scene, it was starting to suffer a lot because of the burden that was being put on these people in terms of work, the voluntary nature of it, the other commitments, and things go in cycles. And it was at a low kind of an ebb, I think, at that point. So, there was me cheekily coming in and saying, "Hey, what are you going to do for me?" You know, as if I was entitled to that. And then realised, shit, there's nobody going to do this. I'm going to have to do it myself. And when I talked to this person in Congress, he said, well, you've got a choice. You either start from scratch and try and build things up, or you go in there and to SIP and you rattle it around a bit and you shake it up and stuff like that. And I thought, okay, let's have a go at this. So we started within Fair City, as you know, I started negotiating various things for SIP as it was. And we would get kind of, you know, nice meetings, and the guild, the union would be with us, and we'd get little increments here and there. Tom was in on regular meetings and stuff like that. And there was a lot of frustrations. I mean, there was this we knew that we didn't have a lot of muscle really, because some writers were with us, some weren't really in SIP, some had agents, some wanted to do their own thing, some were so bloody happy for a job as a writer that they didn't want to know anything about it. So I realised we're going to have to do something here a little bit, maybe slightly, you know, left of field to get anywhere. And I decided the soap had a group of writers, about 12 or thereabouts, wasn't it, Tom, at the time? That's a bunch of people who are all doing the same job, not like your disparate group of playwrights. I mean, it must have been so difficult with that kind of organisation. And we're working on a kind of a process. You know, there's a conveyor belt here with a product at the end of it. And, you know, that's what's people who go on strike do, is they can pick a point, a vulnerable point in that process, and they can, you know, cause a bit of trouble. So I started to kind of put together this little plan of sorts. But what I needed, first of all, was to get everybody under the auspices of SIP. And that took a bit of doing, as I said, because of the nature of the different people who were writing at the time and who valued their jobs and stuff like that. But what I finally did was I said, okay, after we gradually wrote people in, I said, here's the system in Fair City. Every 12 weeks, or I think it was every 12 weeks, a group of 12 scripts, I think, are handed in. And there's a whole production load of people waiting for them, for the scripts to get the system going. And it's on an actual clock, has to happen. What do we hit them there? There's a little chink in that. So we talked and we discussed it, and it was quite a difficult one. And I would kind of sit there saying to people, this'll do, this'll work, whilst thinking to myself, what the bloody hell, this could be extremely dangerous. But we decided to go for it, ultimately, having gotten all the people to kind of agree to it. There was still lots of people saying to me, are you sure? Is this okay? If, you know, because what I was saying to people is, you're going to get a call on the day you have to hand in your script, and you're going to have to say no. And there's, as far as I know, there never has been a writer's strike in Ireland. And I don't think there's, well, actually we did this a second time a couple of years later because it worked the first time, why not? But we said, tell them to talk to me, to Sean. And sure enough, you know, the clock was ticking down. I was having sleepless nights over this, I didn't know, because I had been reassuring everybody. And sure enough, the day came. I was watching the clock and it was filmic. There was tick, 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 tick. They're probably phoning X now, probably phoning Y now, tick, 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 tick. And let me just jump back slightly. At previous meetings to this, when I would bring up this subject, I'd say, listen, I've come across this thing in the Society of Irish Playwrights that says writers should be paid for repeat. And in fact, the word repeat wasn't there, so it was the word rebroadcast. And Fair City at the time was being rebroadcast, but we weren't getting paid for it. And every time we brought it up at the meeting, it was just dismissed out of hand. So that was the crux of why we were stopping. It wasn't just for a few bob more. It was, we want to talk about this, but each time it would just be summarily just dismissed. No, that's ridiculous. And on the day of the phone call, everybody said, you have to talk to Sean about the repeat, and kept coming back. And eventually I got the call from the producer there saying, we have to talk. And the result of that was we went into arbitration. And I'm not sure, we wanted 45%, but I think we got 35 in the end. So it took a period of time, a number of weeks or whatever, in arbitration, and to all our amazements, writers got paid for repeats, and it upped people's wages and money by a huge amount, which I could hardly believe, and I couldn't understand that RT had caved in so, in a sense, quickly and easily. So I'm going to jump ahead then to the Writers Guild or rather the New Zealand and the IAWG, and I told them that story, and I think number one that was enough to impress them, but secondly, what they really wanted was to know that we had a right to negotiate for writers, and I was able, because John had been across this and has told you the story, that we had the license, we had the right to do that. So the IAWG asked me, after I told the story, they said, okay, would you leave the room now? We're going to discuss the issue. And what I'd been looking for at that in New Zealand was for us to become members. I hoped for that, because the previous year I'd gone to London with two other members of the Guild at an invitation just to see how it operated, and I'd been blown away by how organised they were compared to what we were struggling to do in what was then SIP, with just occasional meetings and stuff like that. You could see that these people were serious professionals. And as you get the taste now, or you would have picked up by now, we'd been pretty much a bunch of amateurs trying our best. We were all writers first and foremost. We weren't union people. We didn't really know how you go about these kind of things. So seeing how the international guilds operated was our inspiration, and was what gave me, basically the blueprint for how the Irish Guild should be, which is why we opted and decided to change it from the Society of Irish Playwrights to a guild, to give it that identity. I'm going to jump slightly back to even before going to New Zealand. When I had got this, I think it was an email at the time, I don't think it was a call, out of the blue from this strange guy called Dave Kavanagh, and he basically said, I believe you've something to do with SIP, something like that, there's a whole lot of issues, and there's a list of issues. I didn't even know what they were. I didn't understand them. All I knew was going into rooms and shouting at people for more money, really. And I said, well, yeah, you sound like you know stuff. Maybe we should meet. So I met with him, and he talked stuff through to me, and he left me kind of dizzy again with stuff that he figured had to be sorted and done and things like that. As I say, I was a writer. I make up stuff. This all this serious kind of negotiating stuff simply wasn't my strength. But in New Zealand, after I'd given them the account of how we'd won this battle with RTE, and how we had all these negotiating rights, and how we were struggling to kind of come together, because I'm not telling you there was about 4 other fights going on at the time between me and the Writers' Centre, and me and a whole lot of other people as well. But after the dinner in New Zealand, because I'll keep jumping back to that all the time, was the chair of the guild at the time called me over just before lunch, and he said, can I have a little chat? I didn't know. I was hoping he'd say, yes, you can become a member. And he looked at me with a slightly pained look and said, would $20,000 be any use? And I honestly didn't believe what I was hearing. $20,000? What? Are you serious? He said, yeah. And he looked at like I was ungrateful. Is it not enough? I was like, hold on, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, no. And I don't think I enjoyed dinner that night, and I don't think I slept that night, because I was saying to myself, bloody hell, you know, there was this fight with RTE. It took up a few years of my life. Now they've given me money. I can't go away. I'm stuck here with loads of money, and I'm going to have to continue this. All I want to do is write. Can people just not leave me alone? Then the light bulb went on over my head. That's weird guy that I met that time. What's his name again? Dave Kavanagh, yeah. So jumping ahead, I get home to Dublin to say, you know, we've got all this money. I remember there was a bit of a muted reaction at the time, but I said, listen, I think we should give it to this weird guy, which at the time everybody thought, what the hell are you talking about? But really, in a sense, that's where the Guild became the Guild that it is today. I think was that there was this strange synchronicity between me getting that money, me meeting David, the Writers Guild, as I kind of had done that fight in RTE, and I found this letter that said, would you be interested in coming to London to the IAWG? All these different things just came at the right time from all directions, but they seemed to gel, because I couldn't have taken that $20,000 and proceeded to put together the various agreements and things like that really needed to be done. I needed somebody to basically hold my hand. And the Lord sent good old David. I ended up fighting with David in the end, as is characteristic. I'll probably have a fight with all of you before I leave here, but no, I'm leaving early, so you're okay. But can I say I'm glad I'm out of it. It nearly killed me. It half killed me. It was sweat. It was toil. All of that. I really take my hat off to, as I say, the Johns and Toms and everybody who stuck with it over the years and are continuing to keep life into the Guild. I hope it goes on for many, many years. But thank you, folks. Again, I hope I haven't talked too long or bored the bloody legs off you. Okay. Enjoy the conference. Have a good one. And here's to you guys. I see Dave down there.
That was Sean Moffatt. Sean was the reason I joined the Guild. He got me into it. Just briefly, Sean and I would do kind of yearly negotiations with Fair City for a raise. It was just a dance you did every year. And you know the good cop, bad cop thing? We didn't talk about that. It ended up, I was in a room with this maniac. It was one bad cop, insane. And the fear in my eyes, I think, communicated itself to the negotiator across, because both of us went, Jesus Christ, let's give him the money or he's going to go mental. So it worked. It worked. And apropos of that, RTE, we said, give us 45% because it's a repeat. And they said, this is so brilliant. It's not a repeat, it's a retransmission. Fuck. I didn't realize they had that kind of imagination. That was probably the only time they ever did it. And just to finish on that, we wanted 45, we got 35. I am still pissed off at that. Not us, we fought really, really well, but those bastards, Jesus, would have killed them, probably. So, as Sean said, now we're a guild. Now we're getting seriously guilty. We're getting gilded up. And we got a pro. It was great. This is David Kavanagh. He was our the first director of the Irish Playwrights and Screenwriters Guild, of the Guild. He stayed our director for 18 years. Obviously, many of you here know David, and you know of his long list of virtues and accomplishments. Those of you that don't know David, this conference only lasts 2 days, so we don't have time to go into his list of virtues and accomplishments. Just say he's a really good man to have on your side, and he's just a really good man in general. And look, he gets 2 photographs. I don't know when that was taken. Probably last night before you started drinking. So we're getting seriously guilty now. 2001, we are one of the 10 guilds that founded the FSC, the Fédération Scénariste d'Europe. Yeah, all right. The Federation of Screenwriters in Europe. So there were 10 of us at the start, 10 guilds at the start. There are now 28 guilds from 27 EU countries. I beg your pardon, 26 EU countries and Great Britain. What were they thinking? And here, this is FSC signing its charter in Athens at the Greek Parliament. This woman in black here, that is Katerina Marinaki, the first president of FSC. And along the table there, the first vice president of FSC, the kid in the blue shirt. That's me! No, that's it. That is me. Because you can tell because of the lack of a gas mask. That's me. 2001, we also joined the IAWG, which is just thrilling. Notoriously shy and retiring bunch of people. So we don't have photographs of them, but we do have words on paper, which is much more important, as we know. So we are indeed members of the IAWG. IAWG is the main sponsor of this conference and previous World Conferences, and without them, we wouldn't be here. But then, since we are part... All right, yeah. But since the WGI is part of IAWG, without us, we would not be here. Okay, thank you. You can ponder the philosophical import of that sentence, over coffee. IAWG is 14 guilds and counting. It's kind of more global. It's got America, East and West. It's got Canada. It's got New Zealand. It's got South Africa. It's got India. We're going to have Korea. We're looking to South America. Because when the streamers and the production companies and the producers go global, you really got to go global to stand up against them and fight them. And kind of apropos of that, in 2007, the Irish Guild went on the picket line. Steps were literally taken in support of our sister guilds in America during their writer's strike, which they won. Jumping ahead a little, in 2023, the Writers Guild of Ireland went on the picket line again. Steps were literally taken again in support of our sister guilds in America in their writer's strike, which they won. And steps will have to be taken again because this fight, it goes on all the time. And so you have to stay strong, and you have to hang tough, and you have to stay together. And apropos of that, because we're in Ireland, this is Jim Larkin, Labour organizer. There's a statue of this man in O'Connell Street in Dublin. If you're there, have a look, check it out. And on the statue are these words. I said them in Copenhagen, I'll say them again. I hope you keep saying them to other people. He said, the great only appear great because we are on our knees. Let us rise. Jesus Christ. I saw it in the program. We're going to talk about the years of austerity. Okay, 2008. Let me explain global economics to you, okay? The fan. The shit. Bam! We lost half our funding. Ireland apparently lost the entire north, so I suppose you got to keep a perspective on these things. Belts were worn a little tighter. So we're writers. For most writers, most years are years of austerity. That blue shirt I had in Greece in 2001, I still have it. Because I can't afford to be flinging money away madly on new clothes. Come on. But we're volunteers. Our staff aren't. David Kavanagh, Cleanna Russell. And we had many, many meetings where cut their hours. We'd cut their hours. We'd cut their hours. They ended up working 2 days a week, but they stuck with us. And we got through it, and we kept going. We kept going. And in 2012, Irish film released that year, Grabbers. I'm sure you've all seen it. It's fantastic. Written by Kevin Lahan. And if the sky fall, yes, big song that year, Skyfall, written by Adele and Paul Epworth, and sung by Adele. That year, the Irish Playwrights and Screenwriters Guild became the Writers Guild of Ireland. Got there. And this is Joe Byrne, who's the first chair of the Writers Guild of Ireland. Joe can't be here, but I was on the phone to him and I said, Joe, what about it? And he said, well, mention our staff that stuck by us. He was going to say that. That's how I put that in. And I said, why did we change our name? I mean, I was there and I can't remember, so, you know. And Joe said, because it was easier to say than the Irish Playwrights and Screenwriters Guild. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. And I thought, yeah, you're right. That's true. It is. That's very, very good. So there was that, but there was also that we wanted kind of to align ourselves with guilds worldwide because we were moving out into the big world, and that's what we wanted to do. The Writers Guild of Ireland. So that's 2012. 12 years to go, man. No, let's just get here now. It's 2024, and you are, as I'm sure most of you probably know, you're in Ireland. So that probably isn't necessary, but I did want to put up a bit of green because it is our Emerald anniversary. It's been 55 years. And in the 12 years since the previous slides, nothing really has changed because we do our job. We got professional and we do our job, and that's what we're supposed to do. Day in, day out. It's not always glamorous, but we do it. So 12 years, nothing changed. Nothing changed. We're still fighting for writers. We're still looking for affiliations with our other guilds. We're still looking to stand strong in the world. The only thing that changed is our logo. We're not kind of cool and jazzy and blue. All right. And this is our current chair. That's such a cool photo, isn't it? I tell you, that photo and John's photo, John Lynch's photo, they're the best. They're fantastic. At this point, Jennifer, I was going to ask you to come up and say a few words. Do you still want to do it after that spectacular speech that was done at the last minute? That was brilliant. So, yes, come on. Jennifer Davidson.
You know, in this Writers Guild business, I seem to have made a bit of a habit of following Thomas McLaughlin, so why break with tradition? So as you may have gathered, Thomas asked each of us to pick a photo that represented our time as chair of the Guild. So initially I thought, hey, no problem. I've got loads of photos of me waving my hands in the air, giving speeches at various Guild events. And then I remembered that I became chair of the Writers Guild of Ireland in September 2020. So most of those arm-waving speeches were actually on a Zoom screen, and most of my first 2 years as chair involved a lot of cameos from my cats. So that's Susie, and her sister is Midge. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the marvellous Mrs. Maisel. So I kind of insisted that we kick-started this World Conference with a WGI retrospective, not just because it's our Emerald anniversary, but because I think it is so important to look at how a small guild in a relatively small country can build power and solidarity. And the fact that now, as a guild, our membership numbers keep increasing year on year, and our profile is growing and growing, the fact that we are even in a position to contemplate hosting an event like this is testament to all the hard work of all the chairs and board members and volunteers and staff that have gone before. And also, I hope that maybe we can be an example to other smaller guilds in the room or to writers in countries where there are not any guilds yet, that it is possible. So when I was looking back at old clips from our events to prepare for this session, I came across a clip from our 2019 Zebby Awards. We call our Writers Guild Awards the Zebbies after OZ Whitehead that John spoke about. And in 2019, Thomas presented David Kavanagh with our Special Services to Writers Award. And while I am so rightly proud of our guild and everything that we have achieved, David's words on that night were such an important reminder to me when I listened back to them. And what he said, and this is a direct quote from Mr. David Kavanagh, he said, "We're not finished. We haven't done the work yet that we are supposed to do. The contracts that you sign are shit, and you shouldn't sign them. And the money that you get paid is appalling. It's stupid money, and it's not fair. It is not appropriate. It's not right." So while we've achieved great things over the last 55 years, make no mistake, the work is not done, and we will always keep fighting on your behalf. Thank you.
Absolutely. Always true. Always true. We're nearly finished. Well done. Well done. You did great. Fantastic. So guilds are important. They're important for fighting and for struggling, for negotiating, for getting what's rightfully yours and all that kind of stuff, the high-profile kind of stuff. But guilds are also important for just bringing writers together. I mean, it's a solitary business a lot of the time. So it's good for writers to get together, chat, swap shirts. I have a blue one, anybody's interested. For award ceremonies, to celebrate, to have some food, to have some drink, to sing. Should be more singing, should be mandatory, I always think. And sometimes the steps that you have to take are dance steps. You should really have a bit of a dance. So, gonna leave you now with a song from, I'm not gonna sing it though, song from 1969, written by a couple of Irish guys. Okay, look, I said I was gonna tell you the truth, right? These guys are Irish. We know in our hearts they're Irish, okay? Because my mother's name is Lennon. And I have a cousin called John Lennon, actually. So this is a song from 1969. It was written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. And if you care to dance, you go right ahead and dance, because it's your conference, okay? Enjoy.
Our next session focused on building creative relationships. This conversation between Element Pictures' Emma Norton and the Writers Guild of America's Michelle Mulroney explored long-term creative relationships between writers and producers.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for coming today. It's my absolute pleasure to be in conversation with Emma Norton from Element, who's going to give us all kinds of gems today about the importance of the relationship between producers and screenwriters. So Emma and Element have produced incredible work where they've repeatedly worked with the same filmmakers and writers, which to me just says that they've been able to build a really fruitful and trusting relationship, which all of us writers know. When you find a producer that you can trust and you can get on the same page with, you hold on to them and you never let them go, because they're very rare to find. So I wanted to ask you, Emma, to kick off, what are the fundamental building blocks from the producer point of view for a successful creative partnership with a screenwriter?
Okay. Hello, everybody. I think there are two fundamentals. One is trust, and one is creative, what's the word? A shared creative vision. Yep. So taste, essentially. So if you can, trust doesn't come easily, and it comes through many different ways. So a lot of my job is essentially a kind of talent dating, and you go and meet lots of people and you work out if you can talk to each other, or if you both have a shared sense of humor, or if you both think that something is exciting or interesting. And if you think it's exciting and interesting in a similar or in a way that would broaden or make that thing more exciting and interesting. So a lot of that can't happen overnight. And so I think everyone who works in Element understands the importance of building a relationship and building a relationship over time and investing in talent across a period that will eventually bear fruit. And many of the relationships of the talent that we've worked with, some of those things have happened very quickly through one project. The project has worked in a particular way, and that's led to an ongoing relationship. So, for example, with Yorgos Lanthimos, we attached him to what became the favourite and we were working on that project with him. And in the meantime, he came to us with another project. We made The Lobster. And actually, very quickly, that became a relationship of exchange that proved that we were good people to work with to do The Favourite. But the trust, I suppose, came off the back of The Lobster, but The Favourite was already happening. So that was a kind of interesting one, and that it was, I suppose it was a result of Yorgos being a very prolific filmmaker that we could kind of test through work. Yeah. Whereas the majority of experience for a writer working with a production company is that the test will only really come the full test will only come when you get to production, because that's really when you'll find out the mettle of both sides of the relationship. And in the meantime, there's that sort of, there's the space, the speculative space of trying to find people to work with who will, from a writer's point of view, be the best representatives for your work, taking it out into the world. And fundamentally, the most creative sounding boards for you to elevate your work to the best place. Yeah. And I think one of the things, all the producers in Element, we love storytelling, we love storytellers, we love different types of writers, different types of stories. And we've all become quite good at recognizing, because there are multiple producers at Element, who's the right person for different projects. And even between myself and another producer called Chelsea Morgan Hoffman, Chelsea's brilliant with sort of cerebral concept-based projects, and I'm all about heart and people. Like, that's kind of, we work on very different things, but sometimes, like, I'll know that a project is just too conceptual for me, and Chelsea be like, this is me, I get it. So even amongst our own team, we have to understand who's the best person for a project, because in a way we're in competition with each other. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, we all know, especially on the feature side, that pushing a feature through the development process, which can be weeks, months, years, more usually years, into production is really long and arduous, and we often look to our producing partners for that, important troubleshooting, and also, as you said, to be that really trusted sounding board on all things creative. So when you're in the development stages of a process where you are getting a writer ready to potentially go pitch their movie, they might be developing a pitch, they might be refining drafts of their screenplay. What are the sort of best practices you use at Element to make the writer feel protected and supported during that arduous and often long development process? What are some keys and some best practices that you think help you to build that trusting relationship with the screenwriter?
I think we work quite hard to create a quiet space early days, so there's not too many voices too soon. Right. Because often you can take a project out into the world quite early, and then you've got a whole load of people who will be shaping the genesis of that project. And I think Element works quite hard to maintain that sort of protected space, so that when things do go out, there's been a kind of gradual edging towards knowing that this is the right thing. And that's not about writing hundreds of drafts before it even sees the light of day. It's just about making sure that the core team, understand what the project is before you start having to explain it. Yeah. The flip side of that is that you don't want to have exhausted all those conversations before you start really creating. We also have quite, I suppose the different producers try to have the right number of projects for them so they can give the space and the time to the writers, because I think that one thing that's difficult in the kind of modern world is that production companies are under pressure to have a huge amount of projects in development at the same time, and you never want your writer to feel that they're fighting for your attention. The reality, of course, is that they are fighting for your attention, but and
shouldn't feel that.
They shouldn't feel that way. They should feel like they're the only writer that you're working with. But that, from a producer point of view, takes you have to be responsible with your own time, and there's a huge amount of producer's role which is all about finding the new stuff, and the hardest work is getting the stuff that's on the slate made. Yeah. And in terms of your actual question, like what are the real kind of building blocks of that? I think I've come to a point of recognizing, I hope, and I think a lot of us, the good producers do, recognize when something is good enough to go out. Because you're always going to get notes. There's always going to be, you have to give the broadcaster something to comment on. They have to have something they can see they need to fix, and you might know it already needs fixing. Now that's an easy one because you know how to fix it. But sort of striving for absolute perfection before it goes out is just going to be exhausting. So you just want to strive for the sort of tantalizing in the work that you take out into the world, and giving the writer a confidence that they've got to that point, and it might have been a bit further than they thought it was. But they might have thought they were there a draft earlier. But getting to that point and then making the project an active, real world thing rather than a purely kind of amorphous development.
That's one of the really tricky things in a relationship, because we all know the phrase "noted to death," and we all know that sometimes there's lots of cooks in the kitchen on a project, and it's very difficult for the writer to know who they're supposed to really listen to, and it's sometimes challenging for the producing group to consolidate their notes in a way that is helpful for the writer to sort of push them to that next stage. But I think you hit on something really important. I think what all of us crave is that mutual respect where, writers, we work in our own little cocoon to start with, then we invite other people into our sacred spaces, and we want to make sure that there's really fantastic communication, which is what you're describing, and giving that writer that safe space where they can progress their work, and then hopefully the writer and producer agrees that yes, this is now ready for eyeballs, ready for prime time. But I think that's a very idealized version of what we hope can happen and should happen. But it takes a lot of trust and skill and experience on the producer's part to navigate that development process so that it always feels like there's forward momentum, like it's fruitful, like the writer knows what they're working towards, and have clarity about what hopefully the shared outcome is going to be. So I think it behooves both the writer and the producer to keep very honest, open communication channels during that long process to make sure everybody's feeling good about it.
Yeah, and I think over the last while of having done more TV, learning that you're going to be writing for a long period, and there's going to be many goes at something, and trying to make sure that in the beginning you stay in the big picture, because just because a joke annoys you or the end of a scene isn't maybe as good as it could be, like you've got a year and you're going to have years of fixing that. Like bring that up when it's relevant. If the sort of fundamental question of the show is not there, just stick on that. Stick on the big stuff. And I certainly, with the development execs that I work with, it's really easy to get a script and be like, oh, there's a logic issue in scene 3. It's like, cool, doesn't matter. Have you noticed that the character? I don't understand what she's feeling. Why is she so angry? It's sort of trying to kind of keep everything at the top line. Because if you all get lost in the detail too early, then it's never going to substantially improve, and that's when you get lost. That's when you get noted to death,
That's right. That's really a smart way of putting it, that keeping the big picture in focus and the details will come later, right? Yeah. That's fantastic. Can we move on to talk about something that I think is really probably one of the trickiest parts of your job, and certainly difficult for writers, is how does the producer's role differ when you're working with a writer-director who's in charge of both sides of things, and in scenarios where you're working with a screenwriter who then brings the director onto their project? Now, I'm a writer. I'm with the Writers Guild of America West, and so, I'm always going to be boosting the writer perspective, and we know that film is considered a director's medium. We might have something to say about that, but, we understand and value the role of the director, of course, and those collaborations are dynamic and vital, and nothing can happen without the director. But how do you as a producer work with the writer when a director comes onto the project to ensure that they feel like their vision and their contributions are still valuable, they're not sidelined and pushed? I'm talking in features. Obviously, TV is a whole different world where, certainly in the US system, it's a world where writers have primacy, and we are going to fight to keep that going forever. But on the feature side, I know in my own experience and from writers I talk to in the States, that you can very often feel sidelined once a director enters the project. How do you play the go-between? How do you help the writer to feel that this is still very much their project?
Yeah. I think I've probably got quite a useful anecdote about this that has been...
Hooray!
Yeah. I always think specifics are probably the most interesting. So, and it's a TV example, but it is, I don't think it's an Irish show, and we're all quite open about this. So I was working on a series called The Dry, and it's a writer-creator called Nancy Harris. Nancy's a great writer. She's from the theatre background. So again, a writer used to the control of theatre and having that kind of creative vision. And she'd worked with directors in the past who she had not felt it hadn't been a particularly enhancing experience. So when we came to bringing on a director for The Dry, there was a bit of nervousness from Nancy about how she would maintain her vision and find someone who understood the show and honoured it. And she very much wanted to find a good director, but she didn't want to find someone who would take up too much space or infringe on her own space. So I had worked with a director called Paddy Brannock, who I thought would be perfect for the show. And I had been priming him. I'd been chatting to him over a few years, telling him what it was and all the rest. And then eventually I introduced Nancy and Paddy to each other. And it was during COVID, so it was a Zoom. And it was awful. It was one of the worst conversations I've ever witnessed. And I couldn't believe what was happening. I was like, Paddy was nervous, Nancy was defensive. I was just sitting there going, what's happening? Why are they talking to each other like this? And I came away from it and they were both like, afterwards going, I don't know about that. I don't think that worked. And I was like, no, I don't think it did. But I really believed that they were a good creative partnership, and that because I had all these great conversations with Paddy about comedy and about understanding the kind of transfer of comic power between scenes and how you carry a line of comedy through scenes and the energy needs to shift and you can't drop it. And I was like, this is such valuable insight. And I know it'd be good for the show. And for about 2 weeks, I wandered around my part of Dublin on the phone to both of them going, yeah, that call was funny, wasn't it? I don't think it was your best call, and maybe there'll be a different way of you two communicating with each other. And so in the end, I managed to get them together without any onlookers or other bodies. And they had a very honest conversation with each other about why that call hadn't been a brilliant thing. And finally talked about what they both understood the show to be, just together. And in that conversation, they found a common ground, which still needed management beyond that point because it was still very early days. But I didn't want to let it go because I really thought that Nancy deserved the best director for her show, and I really thought that Paddy was that person. And it was scarily, unsuccessful in its first iteration, but I kept going with it because in the end, it became completely worth it. And now the collaboration between Paddy and Nancy and myself is one of the most sort of fruitful that I have. And for Nancy, it's been a real understanding, or she's gained a real understanding of how the baton of creative collaboration can be a real shared enhancement. So what she sees that Paddy adds to the process and where she knows she doesn't need to go because he's got that, and how she can focus her energy on the areas where her talents are given the most space. And she'll come on set now and again, and we all talk about everything before shoot. And Paddy's sort of vibe there is that if he has all of Nancy's thoughts and ideas really fully in his head by the time he gets to set, her voice is with him on set. He's a very collaborative person. Not all directors want that voice. Yes. They don't always want another voice in their head. But I suppose to break down that anecdote, it was about persisting on helping two people find a space where they could really test whether collaboration was possible. Yeah. And could have come out of that and found that it wasn't possible. That they may not have had a shared vision. And sometimes there can be a real disparity between what a director sees and what a writer sees in a project. And I think sometimes producers have to be, they can't settle into a complacency about the fact that it'll still just work. You know, you have to really try and police that and do everything you can to create the creativity doesn't come from battlegrounds, particularly, I don't know, maybe some conflict creates.
Some people thrive on that.
Yeah, some people do. It's not necessarily how I like to work. But I've rambled off a bit. But
well, you're sort of describing how you took somebody from a very awkward first date to a sort of a fairly happy marriage, and you know,
marriage
now they're renewing their vows constantly, which is quite a journey.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sure that you've experienced, and I've certainly experienced, and I'm sure many of us in the room have experienced times when it's been a bit of an arranged marriage, and it hasn't been easy, and there's been a lot of pressure from a director, especially if they're a powerful director. And you might have a newer or early career writer struggling to keep their identity on the project. And again, I'm talking more in the realm of features where historically, I always say you don't see a screenwriter on a movie set unless there's a problem. They're not there, you know, just hanging out. They're there because something's gone wrong and they've got to come and fix it.
Yeah.
But, you know, I do feel that features writers often feel like, you know, once they've gone through the arduous development process, once production starts rolling, they're very much see you at the premiere, bye, and then you show up and you see what your movie turned into, and sometimes you're happy, and sometimes you're like, and you know, that's where you need to trust the producer who's there every day on that set, making that movie happen, to be your representative when you are absent and sort of say, hey, we're getting away from the core of what this project has always been, or we're making changes that are sort of what I call Jenga changes, where you pull out a piece and you collapse the whole project. And without the writer physically present to oversee some of those processes, I think calamities can happen, and what ends up on screen is a very compromised version of what the writer intended. So I'm sure that you've been in those trenches too.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, and this is probably, you know, something I realized retrospectively, but I think another really important thing is to try and be as transparent with a writer as possible about the way that a director works, or a particular director works. Because if a director, there are many directors who shoot the words, that's what they do. Others will want to write over the script at the end. Absolutely. And as early on in the process as possible, writers should know that the game they're in on this project is going to be that director is going to get their pen out. And if that's a shock, that's a mistake, you know, because really, in a way, you want to be able to say, look, if this is the director we're talking about, understand what their work is. I hope you like that work. That's what we should all be hoping for here, is that putting these two things together is going to make a really great piece of art. But they are a writing director, and they will have words they're going to put on the page. And if that's uncomfortable, then we're going to have to try and talk about that early. And then in the meantime, in the space before that, like creating enough space that a writer feels that they have an ally on the project, and that their work has gone to the best place it possibly could. So, you know, at the point there can be a creative break, or the voice, you know, is no longer present, that the work that's been handed over was something they feel as happy with as possible. Yeah. But it's really, you know, it's hard to navigate.
It's so hard to navigate, but you said something really important. I think all writers appreciate being forewarned and understanding this collaborator that they're now jumping into bed with, and making sure that if this is a director that loves, they'll shoot your script, your scene, but then they'll do 2 or 3 improv scenes, and they encourage that. You know, it's respectful to give the writer a heads up and to let them know what they're getting into. And then, you know, if the director is kind of, you know, taking their pen out, as you say, we'll duke it out in credits arbitrations later and see what happens there. But yeah, it's much better to be forewarned than to show up at the screening and go, what happened? You know, so I think that we might need to clone you and send you around to sets everywhere to be the go-between. But that's really, really helpful. This is a sort of me putting on my union hat and talking about, you know, probably one of the thorniest issues I feel like writers face, and certainly face when working with producers and choosing the producers that they want to work with, which is the issue of free work, the issue of the amount of work that's asked at times from writers through the development process in particular, but even through the production process, where they feel like they get stuck on this hamster wheel of endless free drafts. And unfortunately, most of those requests do come directly from producers. And our guild, the Writers Guild West, is about to sort of take on a campaign where we go and directly meet with production companies and producers that are notoriously bad at respecting free work boundaries, and sort of put a shit list together and say, you don't want to get on that shit list and be one of those producers that is exploiting writers' time, preventing them from getting paid on time, and all the things that go along with free work. Now, hot potato question. We also lament the fact that you producers do so much fucking free work, and you shouldn't, and you should have a union that protects you the way our union protects us. You should not be working for months and years for free, and we sincerely hope at some point you're able to get the kinds of protections that we crave and that we work very hard towards. But how do you navigate working the development process where writers very much understand they have to do some drafts? I mean, you have to come up with your pitch and you have to write your script, and you're often not paid for that part of the process. But once you're in a deal that's structured and has steps involved, how can a producer get the best script possible that benefits you, benefits us, benefits everyone who's involved with the project, without exploiting writers' time and falling into this free work abyss where it's honestly just creatively depressing, professionally depressing, financially depressing for the writers involved? So I'm tossing the hot potato into your lap.
I mean, it's a huge question, isn't it? I suppose how to break it down. I mean, you always want this. I suppose I'm thinking about a project in particular, but I have a script of a TV project, and it's we're doing a pilot and a series outline, and I would have hoped to have got the pilot out sooner than we have, and it definitely started in a point that I was like, this is going to be quick, we're going to get it out. And I have been through more drafts of that pilot than I would have wanted to. And the way that the deal is structured is you're paid on commencement, delivery, and acceptance. And that's before it's gone to a broadcaster. Yeah. And so that kind of question of when acceptance happens is a tricky one, because when it's outside of a broadcaster deal, the acceptance is the producer's acceptance. Or it can be, because there's no one else to accept it. But that distance between that kind of first delivery and acceptance can be long. And also, that's even before anybody else starts giving it any notes. And then, you obviously have to get into another deal when you get to the broadcaster. I think there are some sort of utopian ways to avoid it, which is knowing the writer really well, knowing how they respond to notes, what sort of notes they're going to respond to, understanding the show as much as possible before they start writing, not giving half the notes, just trying to really find the most comprehensive thing. But sometimes with a project, you're all trying to find it. And that sort of sense of when it's found, sometimes that can take 4 goes, or it can take 6 goes. And I think there's things I've done in film where we've had a deal and the first draft has been a good draft, but the notes on it they're not revisions, they're big notes. Then I've gone straight to second draft and have held the revisions for later, because it's like I know what I'm asking is bigger than revisions. So I think kind of being respectful and trying to understand the scale of what you're asking is an important part of the producer's responsibility to make work manageable, and being clear about what the end goal should be. Yeah. I mean, for the project I was talking about, the writer's working willingly. It's her show. She wants it to be as good as it can be. And actually, the last draft she read, and she was like, "Oh, I didn't like that at all," which was a relief, because I didn't either. But it's, I think there's a kind of producer's responsibility to go, okay, well, look, we've actually got a lot of times now. do you want to go again? Is this, is it not working? Is this kind of creative relationship not working because we aren't quite finding the thing? And I've been in that situation where you've been searching for something draft after draft, and then it's like, okay, well, for whatever reason, what I'm saying to you isn't going onto the page, which either means you don't agree with it or you don't understand, or I'm looking for something that you don't want to put there. So are we at the point where we have to stop? Because maybe somebody else would work with you more constructively. Yeah. Because I think that the sort of real death of a thing is where you just keep going and going and going again. And like you said, it can be for years. Yeah. And I've had things I think it could be attritional on both sides, because also producers don't want to read it 500 times because they lose their ability to comment in a meaningful way. So, I mean, I think I've had lots of things where it's taken a while to get set up, and I've known that the script I had 4 years ago was a good script. I don't need to work on it. I'll just keep going until I find the right place for it. That's the best case scenario. And like I said earlier, you don't have to fix everything from the very beginning. But being respectful of the process and going, okay, actually this is exhausting, you're exhausted, is there a different way of skinning this now? Is the pilot actually the thing we need to sell less off? Maybe we sell it off something else and we come back to the pilot once we've got the show set up. Knowing when to stop writing, I suppose, is the
nothing's ever really done. I think some of the stuff that we talk about internally is some of what you're touching on is going into the relationship with the producer, certainly in the US, understanding what the rules are and understanding what the confines of our contracts are. And so if I'm coming into a process with Element and I have 3 steps in my deal, that means you get 3 drafts from me, not 4, not 5, not 6, 3. And so it's kind of about being collaborative as the writer and communicating with the producer. I mean, my partner and I, we always communicate about how we like to work, how we prefer to receive notes, written, verbal. You know, we over-communicate at the beginning of the process. We have this many steps in our deal, so you'll be getting this many drafts. So tailor your notes accordingly, like you said. So, okay, we can take a big chunk of notes after the first draft, but we will only do them when we're being paid for the second draft, et cetera, et cetera. And we found in 25 plus years of doing this, that really direct and open communication with the producer doesn't bother anyone. They just know, oh, okay, this is how we're going to work this development process. And they kind of appreciate the upfront frankness. And so we're trying to encourage more of that between producers and writers, where we are making sure we are all respecting one another's jobs that we're doing here, but that fundamentally what we would like from the producer is a much more kind of disciplined process of note-giving and development that works within contracts, not outside of contractual spheres. So that's kind of the goal of our guild right now, is formalizing a different kind of process that recognizes that it's an iterative writing process and nobody nails it in one draft. But also, like you say, I think there are diminishing returns anyway creatively when you go on and on and on. But also it obviously presents all kinds of, financial and career problems. The opportunity cost of doing constant free work when you could actually be working on new material, new specs, other projects, is really coming into focus and for our members in the WGA. And it's something that we're very adamant about dealing with. And producers, we want producers to be our partners in this. And we want to be collaborative and we want to be open and honest and just kind of be a lot more direct about what both of our processes need and what they are. And so some of the things you're touching on are actually really useful to hear. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, the other person in that, of course, is also your agent, because I'm very happy. Like, I there's many times where I'll get the agent call going, so she's delivered, right? And I'm like, but I expect to be accountable to an agent, and I expect to be, that's part of my job, is to be able to then candidly discuss with your representative, if you don't want to have the conversation directly with me, where we're at and where we're at in relation to the contract. And, there's frequently times where that conversation is going, well, there's a bit more work to be done. And the agent said, well, actually, she just appreciate to be paid. And he would like to be paid. And I was like, good, right, well, we do that. Then we'll just keep, there's going to be this other thing. But it's all discussed so that there isn't any, it's completely fine to ask the questions of like, where are we at? What's the plan? How many, why are we in this space?
I love that you must only know good agents then, but yeah.
Well, I mean, the conversation is not always fun.
Yeah, it's not much fun, but I think we often find that part of the frustration is that our agents are not helpful in helping us fight back against crazy amounts of free work and delayed deliveries. The messaging from them is far too often just play the game, just do whatever they ask you to do, and they don't care that we have to pay rent. So I think it's great when you can. We're both saying the same thing, which is it's all about transparency. It's all about setting up the playing field before you enter it, so that everybody knows what kind of director they're working with, what kind of deal structure there is, what are the expectations about how notes are given and received. And I think the more we can refine that communication, I think the better creative experience we can all have together.
Definitely. And I think, a lot of the writers I'm working with at the moment, they are experienced. They've had quite a lot of, the last 10 years has been very active. So there's suddenly a lot of people who've got a lot of experience very quickly. And so they're very savvy about the industry. Yeah. And those writers are, there's a lot of kind of questions around, like, so who's reading this now? Yeah. Who are these notes from? Yeah. Are they your notes or are they somebody else's notes? Whose notes are they? And I think I find that sort of level of questioning also very good, because it's like, okay, I can explain to you what my process is, which is I will work with you. We will craft this thing. It will then go a couple of steps out into the wider company, and other people will feed in notes, and I will decide which of those notes I think is useful, and then I will feed them back to you. But the writers that I'm working with, they're asking those questions before I even think to offer it, and that's very useful for me, because it's like everyone knows what they're at. And I think that's reassuring for a writer, because it's not like there's like secret mysterious notes that don't really sound like an Emma note, but they've come from somewhere. And who's the shady voice in the corner? I think that sort of essentially what you said at the beginning about having longevity of relationships is you kind of have professional friendships, and you want to be as kind of honest and respectful in a useful way as you would with a friend. So not everything has to be on the table, because honesty has its can be damaging as well. But useful, well chosen, factual sharing and transparency is the way to maintain those long-term relationships.
I think that's the path forward. Now, I would always encourage any writer, but particularly early career writers, to get comfortable with the idea when they start a new project of being very candid about what kind of process works for them and what they need. And then, of course, shit happens during the course of a long project, and so we all have to pivot and adapt. But I think starting with that, what's your process? This is mine. Yeah. I think getting comfortable with having those early conversations can help you troubleshoot a lot down the line. But thank you for engaging in that. It's like it's a gnarly topic, and it's kind of a headline topic, certainly in the United States, and something that we battle and talk about a lot. Maybe a nicer question. A little softer question. I think our audience will be interested in, of course, taste comes into it, all kinds of factors, but what are some of the fundamental things Element considers when you're deciding to take on a specific project? How do you choose?
How do we choose?
I'm sure you can choose because you have such a great reputation. So how do you choose your projects?
So on a very granular level, and perhaps this is quite boring, Element has these weekly new project meetings, and every week there's a discussion of what's coming in, so that can be spec scripts and books, and then which writers we're meeting, which directors we're meeting with, what ideas they may be bringing in. So there's this huge kind of influx of information at all times, and that will be based on talent relationships, agent relationships, all of the rest. But that's a lot of noise. It's a huge amount of noise. And a lot of the team is purely devoted to processing that noise. Right. not everyone would call it noise, but for me, I need to have a quite clear space where I can go, okay, actually, what is it that I'm interested in? And as I said earlier, there are multiple producers within Element, and a lot of the production companies do work like that now. And so there's different. We're all vying for finding the thing amongst all of this that is the right thing for us. And like all companies, we discuss what's an Element film or what's an Element TV show. And, you know, in the kind of current downturn of the industry, that's become a sort of slightly more complex subject, because certainly in the kind of the UK market, the US market are our main areas, English speaking. There's been this sort of sense that the world is kind of the commissioners are becoming slightly more conservative in their tastes. Meanwhile, we're the company that make these Yorgos Lanthimos films that are the most wild and avant-garde pieces of cinema going out there. So people come to us with their weirdest, with all their weird things, and naturally our taste is quite expansive. But we are a big company, and we have to make kind of commercially viable choices. So the good thing is that within the realm of the company, there's some of us have more commercial taste, some have more avant-garde taste, and that applies in different places. But really, when it comes down to it, it's about an individual producer or a development executive going, I think this is brilliant. And I think it's brilliant because when I read it, I was excited. That's all it is. That's as simple as it is. And some people are more strategic and some people are more emotion-based. But really, within the company, it's somebody gunning for something and then convincing someone else that it's great, and that then becoming the basis of the argument being put to the collective of like why this should be an element project. Some of the things is just like, I love that writer, we really should be working with them. That's simple. But at the start of the year, a book came into one of the members of the team, and she hounded me for 3 months to read it. And eventually I read it, and I was like in tears and a heap in my little attic office. And I was like, oh no, she was right, this is really good. And but I'm always involved in the things I'm making. I find it very hard to bring on new projects, but so I have to be harassed. Whereas other members of the team are hunter-gatherers, and they just always want to be interested in the new. They're not, and they don't like the years afterwards. that's
the actual work,
the long game. But of course, the thing that you want to feel is that you're going to be excited about something for years because you know it's going to be years, and so it's very hard to take on anything. With a film, it's slightly different because a film can be quick. Yeah. It can be quick, and it can be a sort of burst of energy, whereas a TV is a marathon. Yeah. So to want to keep going with something throughout the lifespan of a TV show, you've got to know you really, really think it's great. It has the potential to be great.
Even if you get it, that's a great answer. Even if you get excited, do you also have to, I'm sure you do, have to have this pragmatic, practical part of your brain that goes, this is so exciting, but do we know how to get it done? Or would we be maybe better off letting somebody else try to push this one uphill? Because it's always uphill on some level, right? So are you able to sometimes kind of, heart and head and go, oh, I want this, but I also can intellectually see, or for practical reasons see, maybe we aren't in the position to really bring this across the finish line?
Yeah, that's it. And there's a lot of factors that will influence whether your project ultimately is going to succeed with our company. One will be, okay, so next year, how many things are we going to get made? So if there's 6 things gunning for development next year, and yours is then joining a queue, what's that queue going to look like? And where have we got our best broadcaster relationships? Where do we think our most fruitful creative conversations are happening? Does that project fit into that scheme of conversations? Because if we've just had a very unsuccessful project with the home that would be the most perfect home for that project, then that doesn't really mean that we're going to be the right people for it. Also, are our talent relationships going to be the most useful ones, again, for this piece of work? So, or like, are we in the right position as a company with a certain with an established, reputation, to access the talent that is needed for this project. So, you know, say sometimes like a first-time filmmaker will come in with a beautiful gem of a film, but the kind of the level of activity that Element works at for that small gem to survive within the big machine that our production company is, it has to be really robust. And probably, in most instances, an individual producer would be the better person to look after that. So you can't just be greedy and gather up all of the toys and say they're all mine now and I'm going to play with some of them sometimes. You know, you have to be responsible and strategic.
I love that you balance the passion and the strategy, because I think it is a pet peeve for writers when you say there are producers or companies that hoard all the good stuff, but they really don't have the bandwidth or the capacity to sort of really see them through. So I appreciate that you guys are honest about that, and that you know what you can and can't take on.
And you know, we know that because there's been things where you've taken them on and then they've languished, and you're like, God, we didn't convert it, we didn't make it, and it's there's lots of disappointments in the back catalogue. So
yeah. Do we have time for a few questions from our lovely audience? I hope we do. Yes, you with your hand up there, sir. Yes.
Understand and shout. Emma, you talked about the downturn that we're sort of all experiencing. Can you give us a kind of a 12, 24-month sort of sense? What's the company seeing? Is there a light at the end anywhere?
We're all counting on this answer.
Yes. I mean, I'm naturally optimistic, and I also think that drama people like life to be dramatic, so we all get quite animated about the global drama. Obviously, there is less money being spent on TV drama, and there are fewer people going to the cinema, so it is a difficult creative time. And certainly, I suppose, in the first instance, we are looking at the kind of budgets for our dramas being more constrained. But actually, from working in the UK and in Ireland, our budgets they'd never got that big anyway. So we're quite good at working that way. We're already well disposed towards that. We know how to work well at that level. So I think the challenge is with kind of more constrained budgets to really still make excellent work. And I think that's completely possible. But it's finding the broadcasters who know how to support that. And I think that there's the degree of biding your time that will have to happen over the next while. I mean, certainly I went through a kind of an 18-month process of taking out one project that I was like, this is brilliant, great writer, great script. And I went to all the broadcasters, everyone said no. And that was last year, at the point where there was real fear amongst all of the commissioners. And then that show has now got picked up because there's been a regime change, there's a different attitude. It's a little bit weird. And the atmosphere towards sort of something being strange or slightly weird has changed to what it was 12 months ago, where that was really not, there was no appetite for it. So I would say that there's always going to be exceptional moments, like Baby Reindeer will get made, and that won't mean that lots of Baby Reindeers get made, or Normal People got made, and then it doesn't mean that lots of Normal People gets made. But good ideas, I think we may have to wait out for their moments a little bit more. But a stable production company should be able to do that whilst also, keeping going. So my hope is that I think probably my biggest I fear more for independent films than I do for television. I think that's the kind of slightly scarier space, and the life of drama films and how drama films get made. I feel like Europe widely is still doing that, but the UK and America are scared of it at the moment. So that's the thing that I hope we can sit out.
Yeah, it's can we sort of hang tough until the inevitable somewhat of an upturn comes, we hope, but we have no crystal ball. We'd be lying if we said we did. You had your hand up. Yes.
So, $6 million question. How easy
Well, it's very easy to approach us. I think to be real about it is, I suppose, Element, we are there's a busy company and there's a high pressure turnover. Everybody cares deeply about finding great people to work with. And so the question around how you convert that approach into a meaningful conversation is really about finding the best person within the company to have that conversation with. Because certainly there's maybe 9 months of the year where I am not that person because I have no bandwidth for anything other than the thing I'm producing or the show I'm delivering. But we're a big team. And I think that one person's very busy time is not another person's busy time. So I think being flexible about who you have a conversation with within a company, understanding that companies like ours work through the hive mind. Nobody is not a valued voice in the Element team. If anyone says that somebody's worth paying attention to, that team will pay attention to it. So I think that, sometimes there's a sort of belief that the only way to build a relationship with a larger scale company is to find the head of that company and talk to them. In reality, that might be a dead end. Might not be. I mean, Ed's very approachable. But that, finding the way in that actually allows for a long-term relationship and back and forth, and also being very forgiving of producers that don't reply to your emails immediately. We all know that there's talent out there that we haven't discovered yet.
Thank you for that. Any more questions? Yes.
Hi. Do you have any experience of a director coming to you and that you're looking for a writer together, and then this writer is developing the story and you like the writer's development better than the director's?
I'm trying to think. I've definitely done so. I've started working with a director and brought in a writer, and I've been in scenarios where that has failed, and learned from that. I don't think we've ever continued with the writer beyond the director. I'm trying to think. There may be an example. Usually, I'm racking my brains. I mean, I think if the writer's created something really brilliant, then you'd want to find some way to make the most of that. But extricating that relationship, if it started with the director, is very difficult. But it's not impossible.
It's a very honest answer.
Yeah.
It is in I think many of our experiences, if a director is dug in on a direction and the writer is perhaps on another path, it doesn't mean that the writer can't influence the director's direction, but very often I think when it's a moving train and a director's kind of deep into their process, it's very difficult to ask them to leave and keep the writer on. It usually is the writer that has to step aside and let the director continue doing their work and perhaps rejoin. This happens a lot, later in the process, perhaps the writer rejoins the project at a key moment and helps get it across the finish line. But it's very tricky, which is why I asked the questions earlier about the writer-director relationship and you being the go-between. It's not always easy. We understand that. Yeah.
No. I mean, the other thing is also that a producer will recognize if the writer's work is potentially, more interesting, and it might not mean that project happens, but it will mean that the producer will talk to the writer about something else because they'll want to capitalize on that creativity.
Any more? Yes, you.
I think you brushed only on the subject of commissioning editors in networks, who sometimes can be great and sometimes speak the same words but mean something different, and it's happening in every country with public networks, I think, and private ones, that the Babel fish should be the production. It's kind of converting to the writers. What they actually mean is, and how much of a firewall and a Babel fish? Do you think the production should be so that the writer doesn't feel misunderstood and the commissioning editor doesn't feel misunderstood? Because that's what's happening a lot of the times, and both of them feel insecure and then lash out or feel passive-aggressive or feel sad or whatever. And how do you see the role of the production as the mediator in a way?
Yeah, I mean, it's a crucial role, and I suppose the best case scenario where you receive notes that don't feel helpful or notes that are hard to interpret from a network or a commissioner is to try and look at the most expansive way of understanding what they're poking at, because some notes are bad notes, some notes are the wrong notes, but there's something in the notes that, you know, you all know this, but it's that thing of, okay, they say they don't like that scene. It's actually not what they don't like. What they don't like is that we're taking the character in this way at this moment, or actually they don't like the scene before this scene, which is what leads to that scene. And it's being able to do a bit of that thinking yourself before you take the note to the writer, because if you take the note to the writer in this sort of inconclusive, like, mud form, then it's upsetting and disturbing, and you can't find, there's no way that anyone's going to succeed in answering that note because it's a bad note, or it's not the real note. And so the best producer work is trying to find the real note and discussing that within your own producing team and going, really, what's the note? And do I have any concerns about this part of the story? And sometimes it's very hard in the sort of the pace of development or production sometimes to allow a note to sit in your head for a week or so. But there's a project I'm working on at the moment, and somebody made a note about something that happens in the series much later being really important and wanting that to happen at the beginning. And I was like, well, that's a really odd thing to say. That doesn't work with the story. And after about 6 weeks, I understood what they meant. and luckily, I didn't say anything to the writer before that period, because I wasn't able to get hold of her. But it was, it's that thing of letting something kind of swill around in your head to the point at which you understand it, and don't do anything until you understand it. And if it's not understandable, don't do it. And hope they don't notice.
If it's bullshit, don't do it, right? Good note, good note.
I'm going to try and word this correctly. What's the worst thing a writer could do when trying to form a relationship with a producer?
Great question. I'm sure we fuck up all the time.
So this is all about ego, but the worst thing to do, the thing that has annoyed me the most is when someone says, oh, I loved this project and I didn't work on it. And it's like they just generally looked at the kind of company credits and said, oh yeah, no, really well done on, you know, that. And it's like, I didn't do anything on that. And a really quick IMDb would have shown you that I didn't work on that. And it's just that thing of going, I wouldn't ever say to a writer, well done for all the work you did on EastEnders, when they didn't write on EastEnders. You want to show that you both are paying attention to each other's careers or the type of work that you both make. And in the same way that I put a lot of effort into researching a writer's work, reading their work, understanding the types of stories they tell, sort of coming up to me and saying, oh yeah, you know, Herself was a really great film. I'm so glad you made it. I didn't. You know, it's a really simple thing, but it happens all the time, and I do get annoyed by it. So that was a simple one.
Do your research, right? That's basic respect. Jennifer, what's our time like? Oh, we have to wrap.
Stop.
Sorry for blabbing on so much, but thank you all of you for being here today, and a huge thank you to Emma.
Soaps have traditionally propped up local production ecosystems, drawing huge audiences and fulfilling an important public service remit. This panel of international soap writers looked at the highs and lows of writing for soap and what the future might hold for this genre.
We're just going to start, and I'm going to ask everyone just to introduce themselves, to talk a little bit about their soap experience and the kind of shows that they've worked on. So, Jessica, I'm going to start with you.
Hi, I'm Jess. I'm from New Zealand, and the soap that I'm working on at the moment is Shortland Street, a medical drama that's been running for, we're in our 34th year at the moment. Yeah, I'm the head writer. Yeah.
Oh, I'm Damon Rochefort. I've been on Corrie about 20 years. We're hitting our 64th anniversary in December. Jesus. Yeah, that's me. I've been on about 20 years, and we can talk about, how we got onto soaps a bit later on. I came through a very circuitous sort of route, but yeah, that's why I'm currently, apart from doing a few other projects, mainly Corrie.
I'm Peter Matesi. I started on Neighbours. I'm Australian, started on Neighbours 20 years ago, and then 10, 15 years ago moved to the UK and worked on EastEnders for 15 years.
And Carl.
Jesus, that is a lot of soap. Carl Austin. Soap-wise, I started on The Bill in 2007. Did that until it ended in 2010. Now I've been working on Fair City here in Ireland for 15 years. Mm-hmm. For 15 years.
Doesn't time fly?
Dear God, man.
It's almost like we've all served prison sentences.
When is my parole, Jennifer? When is it?
We'll ask RTE. And we should say Fair City has just celebrated its 35th
35
anniversary.
years, that's right, sorry.
So all these shows have been running a very long time. But, let's talk about some of those news headlines we've all been seeing. There's been a hell of a lot of talk about soaps being a dying medium, that we're going to be the first line that all get replaced by AI. Is that true? Do we think this is just a lot of rumor? Can soaps survive, or are they going to evolve into something different? Peter, I might start with you on that.
My thought on that is that they will survive, only just because they employ us all, and that's brilliant, and we should hope that happens. But as we've sort of come out of this era, we're coming out of this era of peak television where there's been so much content, you can see broadcasters and streamers clamouring for things that are going to get back what I think television is the best for, which is that it's in everyone's living room every night, and you enjoy something roughly at the same time, if not exactly the same time, at roughly the same time. So you can see all the streamers going for sport. Like, we want live sport because we need to have moments that people can share with each other using our platform, and soap opera is the perfect show for that, because it is in everyone's living room every night and it is current. The greatest strength of soap opera is that it is, at its best, should be reflecting what's happening in the community that it's a part of. And no other genre can do that in the same type of way. And so that's why I believe they should survive, obviously, but I think they probably will.
Thank you. Carl, do you want to come in on
Well,
that?
I was going to say, it's like, I'm trying to remember which one it was. One of the Australian soaps was cancelled.
Neighbours.
It was Neighbours, and that lasted all of, 6 months before they brought it back?
I wouldn't hold your breath. I'm not sure how long it'll survive again.
Really?
Yeah, my feeling is it won't.
Really?
I'm not sure it's been as popular as they would have hoped.
I was, because I very much, when it came back, I was like the guy going, yes! They made a mistake and they realized it. Well, that's depressing. I'm so sorry.
Damon, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think when I started, I'd been in the music business for many years, and I was about 33 or 34 when I finally got onto Corrie. But before that, I managed to get onto a show called Family Affairs, simply because I was desperate to get onto Corrie, because I loved it so much, but had very little experience. And I was doing spec scripts for Corrie, and they kept saying, oh, it's really good. I ended up doing 3, which is some kind of record, I think. But I was so pissed off by the end that the third one I sent to Family Affairs, and they said, oh, that's great, come on. I learned everything in the 3 spec scripts I did for Corrie. I learned everything about how to write, because they sent you really good notes. Even though it was a no, they still sent you really good notes. And that wasn't the only one. There was Dream Team, there was Sky High or Mile High, the one about the airline. There were lots and lots of these sorts of shows that you could serve your apprentice on, learn how to be a writer, and then with any luck go off to do your own project. And I think that is becoming a much narrower and narrower route to even getting a television credit, because those shows were brilliant. And the stakes were quite low. You know, they knew they couldn't pay great script fees. So they knew that everybody that started on Family Affairs or Mile High or any of these wanted to get onto at least EastEnders or Corrie, which are the two big ones, because you were doing 20 million viewers, and it was incredible, you know. Writer's dream of 20 million people watching their bullshit on screen, and it was just fantastic. So that route was kind of easy. It wasn't easy, but it was clear that you started here and you would build, and then you would get there. And when you were like a Russell T Davies, or you know, lots of others that come off Corrie and EastEnders, would then, Sarah Phelps, another good example, would then go off and do their own thing. That's the thing that should be worrying us, really. I mean, there's much bigger macro things about streaming that you've pointed out and everything else. But for budding writers, I mean, what are you going to do? Write gags for Anthony Deck, or you know, or write gags for Richard Osman on Pointless, or you know, if that's no route to really understanding structure and drama and pace and all the rest of it. So that would be my worry. Now, there's only, with Doctors having recently gone, Holby having recently gone, Holly, my husband's here, who's on Hollyoaks, they're down to 3 eps a week, you know, from 5. That meant, you know, a whole swathe of writers. There must be, with just Doctors and Holby and Hollyoaks reducing, that must be 40 or 50 writers who were used to a regular wage and at least getting credits at least a few times a year on screen. That now you've got all those, perhaps up to 60, that's only a guess, obviously approaching Corrie and Emma. There's no room there because they're all full, and so that's become a slight crisis for budding writers. That's what I'd say. That's the worry for me.
That's about 250 hours a year that's gone.
Yeah. And to one more point, actually, the trouble is, it's a commercial business. Of course it is, unless you're lucky enough to be with the BBC, where they're spending our money. But I think that, to be honest, for what they spend on Emmerdale or Corrie EastEnders, they could probably make 10 quiz shows or 10 reality shows. They could make, you know, which will probably rate kind of the same. So luckily, the broadcasters are very aware that they don't want to lose their soaps. But when they become financial, because people can't be asked looking at the adverts, or, you know, they think they want something that doesn't take 3 hours a week, or doesn't say, oh, look, there's something dropped on Netflix, and you got out of the habit of soap. That's the big worry, isn't it?
Yeah, we at Shortland Street have just dropped from 5 eps to 3, like Hollyoaks. And it's been a really interesting thing. Like, to answer your question, I do think we will survive, and I agree, we have to, for literally pathways for our young writers, our new writers emerging to come through. In New Zealand, Shortland Street really is the bread and butter of our industry. It's what employs writers. I've got writers working for me who, this is how they pay their mortgage, and then they're going off and they're pitching and they're getting Apple shows. And if we didn't have the soap opera, we wouldn't be able to sustain our industry at all.
Or our lifestyles.
Or our lifestyles.
Which are fabulous. Yeah. I mean, we absolutely have the same situation here. Fair City is the only long-running show in Ireland, certainly in the English language. It is the only way that writers in Ireland can earn a regular income as writers. We do a salary survey every year in the Guild, and a large amount of our writers only earn between 10 and 15,000 a year purely from their writing. The exception to that is the writers who are writing on soap. So I'm going to look down this end of the panel to the 2 guys who are both involved in writers' guilds. What should we be doing as guilds to make sure that soaps survive?
It's down to you two.
Yeah, what should we be doing? That's a very difficult question to answer. I'm going to give it a stab. It's not that I'm not sure there's much we can do. We need to keep... soaps need to be good, for starters. Something that is... I'm going to tell a bit of an anecdote, is that, like I said, soaps are meant to be about the communities that they're in. When we were just coming out of the first lockdown in Australia, and I was writing a Neighbour script, and I hadn't done one for a while, and I was doing the call, and there was a reference to Paul flying to New York to see his kids at Christmas or something. And I was like, well, obviously Paul's not going to New York, so what are we doing there? And they said, can I just stop you there, Peter? COVID didn't happen in Erinsborough. We want to be a happy place that has none of this going on, and it's just untouched by COVID.
It didn't happen in Corrie either. We never mentioned COVID.
Is that right? Because I'm about to slag it off.
Never came off screen and never mentioned COVID.
You never came off because I was.
It definitely happened in Fair City.
Yeah, it happened in
Shortland
EastEnders.
Street.
To me, it was like, well, there's two things. Firstly, you're meant to be reflecting the society that you're in. I do understand that. I know when COVID was happening, I didn't want to watch anything that had anyone wearing a mask, and it was like, I lived that enough. But you are meant to be reflecting the world that you're in, and it's a bit. I felt that's a bit of a betrayal of that job that soap opera has, that no other genre has in the same way, that is really important for soap opera to reflect what's happening in the world. And they all do it to varying degrees. But the other thing is, you just gave up so much story. There was so much story in that. Who won't wear his mask? Who's having an affair with someone? Who actually finds out they don't like their husband when they have to spend 24 hours a day with them in a room? All these things that are just bread and butter for a soap opera, and they just let it go. And so that, to me, was an error. You might disagree.
Can I just disagree on that? Because the problem we had was that, I'm sure it's the same with you guys, but we have a 6-month lead-in from commissioning to broadcast. So I'm currently writing, I was just in my hotel room now, just writing a script for March. So there was no way that we could know. It would look a bit fucking daft if everyone had masks and the whole rest of the world was, COVID was 6 months past. So it was impossible to place that. I understand your point about being contemporary, but you can't be that contemporary.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think...
Because it would look a bit daft if everyone's wearing masks.
It's
in
true.
the real world, nobody was.
But I think this is not how Writers Guild can help. I'm sorry, I'm not answering your question. I'm saying how soaps can help themselves. If soaps don't hold up their end of the bargain, which is being good or trying to be good and trying to give the audience what they want from them and expect from them, then there's not much that the Writers Guild can do. You know, we can represent the interests of the writers as best we can, but if they're not doing their bit, we can't.
It's definitely up to, sorry, I agree with you. It's up to the writers to make the show as great as it can be. It's like at the moment for Fair City, we're doing really, really well because the audience is really responding to the stories that are going out at the moment, and which is why I feel anyway, we're hearing a lot less about, maybe the show might not be coming back. Maybe it might not be, continuing on. It's like, I haven't heard much of that noise recently in the wake of, oh my God, have you seen what's happening in Carrickstown this week? So I hope you're right. I hope it's just, if we make the show as great as it can, the soaps will stay with us. But there's also the money thing.
I think as well, just on that the one thing that soaps are really good at, like you said, is working fast and adapting quickly. And we have had to, as Hollyoaks have had to go from 5 to 3, and it has really been an amazing opportunity actually in adaptability and resilience and working out how the hell we write what was a 5-night-a-week never-ending medical drama into now 3 nights a week, and how do we make that still feel satisfying and engaging for the viewer. And I think one of the good things about soap is that we're used to doing stuff on the fly, and so we can adapt and change where we need to.
But I think, as Carl said, the financial thing is the thing that we writers don't ever want to think about, right? Because it's boring. That's why we become writers. Well, that's why we're not accountants.
It's a big snooze.
Yeah, we don't care. But what we do care about is the show continues. And I was watching Corrie earlier, and there was a shot of, we've got a Costa on our set, we've got a Sainsbury's. There was a very moving scene I just saw where Fizz is sat at the bus stop, contemplating having an abortion. Very well-written scene, and right next to it was a massive poster for Richard Osman's new book. I mean, it couldn't have been bigger, and you've got this huge poster, you've got little Fizz here like this, you're thinking, what am I supposed to be looking at here? Where do I sit?
You got to pay the bills.
You've got to pay the bills, right? So that's interesting. Corrie is also fighting very hard, and I'd be interested to know your experiences for foreign sales, like Canada, New Zealand's huge for us. Canada is almost bigger as a share than England as a television audience, and every week we get notice. Oh, we got another Canadian group coming round. We got a New Zealand group coming out. Australians love it. Obviously, kind of Commonwealth countries that are second generation and stuff, and they grew up with Corrie. That's the great thing about being on so long. But we have to consider that people aren't going to watch the adverts. They're fast forwarding the adverts. That technology is not going away. I don't watch the advert. Nobody I know. You record it and you deliberately watch it 20 minutes later, so you don't have to watch the advert. Therefore, it's only a much older demographic who settle down and don't fast forward and they want to watch it live. But those people are useless for advertisers. Those people have decided what razor they're going to use. They've decided what soap they like. The young demographic is what they're all desperate for, because advertisers get kids and they will use a brand for life is the idea. I know very little about advertising, but this is something that comes over again and again. So what that has done has put a huge pressure on us at Corrie, and I'm sure it's the same for you guys, for the hooks to work, for the hooks to be these huge, and we're on 3 times a week, 3 hours a week, so you've got 4 ad breaks, so that's 12 big hooks you need every single week, 52 weeks a year. And that can get exhausting, because then they can't always. There's nothing worse than seeing a hook. Someone's fallen down. Watch 5 minutes of bloody adverts, and after, oh no, she's all right. Yeah. And that, and off you go again. And so that gets exhausting for the viewer. They don't like, we call them red herrings or we call them fake hooks. You must see this all the time. It could be cancer, 5 minutes. No, she's fine. So you can also exhaust the viewer, I think, by fooling them like that. So we try really hard not to do that. But how many hooks, because what they're saying is, if you're not engaged in the first 11 minutes, and that's all it is, before the first ad, then they're going to go, see what's on the other side. 'Twas ever thus, but we didn't have streamers.
The streamers are interesting, because what's happened in New Zealand with Shortland Street is we are still the highest rating show in the country, local show, obviously. However, our network can't monetize it, and there's the advertising revenues dropped off by 75% alone.
It's a commercial channel. It's on.
It's it is. I don't know where soaps sit in the streaming worlds. We're having to adapt. The writing of, we're very much leaning Shortland Street more towards a traditional medical drama now than a traditional soap, purely to try and hook into those viewers.
My feeling, this is totally vibes based. There's no research, understanding, knowledge or experience at all. But
Love
vibes.
the vibes. Good vibes.
But it feels like Neighbours was recommissioned by Amazon for their free platform. It feels like a show that is on every day, that's always there, that will bring people to the platform, is something that may in the future be appealing. Because you see that the commissioning for streamers is not as big swing, wild TV shows that you would never have been able to make 20 years ago. They're commissioning cosy crime shows and non-serialised sort of story of the week dramas, really sort of late 90s, early 2000 feel to the shows they're commissioning. And so as they are clamouring, Netflix realising maybe if we don't dump everything in one go, people will come back over and over again. Maybe a soap or some sort of high volume, maybe it's 4 a week, 5 a week, whatever it is the show that can do that for them. All vibes.
And also the other thing that's changed, and again, I don't know if this is your experience at all. I mean, what I loved about Corrie when I was a very small child, I'm such a gay stereotype, was all the battle axe and the slut and the snobby landlady, the archetypes. It was so fascinating. I knew Tony Warren well before he died a few years ago, created the show. And he said he just used to sit under the dining table and listen to his mother and his grandmother, his aunties, talk. Now, that was the beauty of Coronation Street. I remember Ina Sharp was saying, when I go, I'd like to go like my mother. She just sat up, broke wind and died. And that kind of dialogue, which you'd never seen on television before. And bear in mind, this is in black and white. Northern accents were not on television. And it was revolutionary, absolutely revolutionary. And it went around the world. They were like the Beatles. They'd be going off to Australia. They'd be going off to the States. Harold Wilson would be seen with them. The Beatles would be seen with them. So that's a very different thing when you're in a privileged, unique position, and you could kind of do exactly what the show was meant to do, which was to show really boring lives with the occasional but with wonderful dialogue. This doesn't exist anymore at all. Not even in sitcom, where it's got set up, punchline, set up, punchline. This was something where you could. I remember there was an episode where Lynch had a miscarriage. Now these days we would make so much out of that. It would be weeks and weeks of pain and PTSD and all these sorts of things. She never really mentioned. We knew what happened exactly, and Betty said, all you see is her putting the lipstick on, like that, and she looks, and the Betty driver says to her, well, at least you could still smile. And she says, this isn't a smile, it's a scream with a lid on. And you think, oh my God, as good as anything you'd see in a play or, just something so moving. And that's changed. Now everything has to be investigated, which is, I suppose, a sign of the times. We have to tear the art out of everything, really, in the most creative possible way. But, there's no, the idea of stoicism or understatement or letting the viewer make their own mind up, that's gone,
Oh, I feel like we're trying really hard to not do that in Shorten Street. That's been absolutely like
I'm in the wrong job.
Yeah, you need to come over. Yeah, because I think we did a big swing towards exactly, I call it flopping your feelings out. I'm sick of it. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Don't talk to me about your feelings. I want to see you hide them.
Yeah.
Let's all move to New Zealand.
Keep it all in, people. Just keep it in.
So, I don't know if this is specifically an Irish thing, but there tends to be a lot of snobbery around those of us who write for soaps that we may not be considered real writers sometimes, Carol. And indeed, if you look at the hashtag Fair City on Twitter sometimes, oh Lord, is it an experience? But what that is making me wonder is that actually internationally, and particularly I think coming out of the UK, we see that some of the best high-end TV dramas are written by people who cut their teeth on soaps. So actually, what is it about working on a soap that teaches you about writing and makes those writers as amazing as they are, having come up through the soap system? Damon, I'm going to start with you on that one.
Just because it's a lot of work, because you do it all the time, you do it every day. I mean, that rule about 10,000 hours, whether it's Mozart or, Russell T Davies, it's the same thing. I mean, you learn, it's a craft as much as it's an art. Of course it is. You've got to have some talent in the first place, but you can learn and you get better, like in absolutely every other walk of life. It's just something where and also you don't get the opportunity. We've all been in development hell, I'm sure. Possibly everybody in this room has been in development hell. And you're working on, say, one... this has got worse these days, too. I sound like such a moaning bastard. But, the idea of the pitch doc, which used to be kind of you walked in and had an idea, and the commissioner, well, that sounds good. Well, let's have a couple of pages. And, what about this? It could happen quite quickly. Whether it happens or not, the process is quick. It feels now that a writer could spend, I know writers spent 2 years on perfecting a pitch document that has pictures and that has this and that, and they change their minds, and oh no, perhaps we don't want this cast, so we'll change the pitch doc. And you think, those people are not learning how to write a script. They're learning to do what a producer does, really. They're not learning what a writer should be doing, which is pace and momentum and structure and dialogue and character, all those things, which you soon learn as you're on the coal face, if you like. Welsh, I'm allowed to say that. So it's like that is for me the missing thing. Is a lot of people this goes to this kind of the authentic, where people want to tell their own story, which is great, but it's got to be interesting enough for other people to want to watch it. I think also that if you're doing something like that, if you've got your story to tell, which is fine, you could be years and years and years in perfecting this one thing and being disappointed and then coming back and disappointed again. Whereas at least on the soap, you can do that at the same time as you're earning money and learning how to write scripts, right? So it's a proper job. Like being a cabbie who wants to be a chef. You're sort of a terrible analogy. But you know what I mean? At least you could pay the bills. At least you could pay the bills.
I'm not sure I want to eat that, but okay.
With Neighbours, I started as Neighbours I was a script editor for 4 years, which is different to the way they do it in the UK. I don't know what it's like here. in the UK, when you're a script editor, you didn't write anything, whereas on Neighbours, you did the second draft of every 5 episodes a week. And so it was just so much practice. And practice, not just practice going, I'm writing a first kiss scene here, these two haven't kissed before, okay, how do I write it? You write it, and then 6 weeks later or a month later, you get the tape and you could watch it and you go, oh, that didn't work. The next time I write one of them, because I'll write half a dozen this year, I'll have another go and I'll do it a different way. So there was just so much practice and seeing it coming back and being performed. I think a lot of the snobbery about soap, and I've reflected on this a lot, because I've spent 20 years in soap and just continue to write the type of shows that people sneer at. A lot of that is snobbery, not towards the show, but towards the people who watch the show. And it's, I'm sneery about this audience because they said it because they're working class, because they're women. Soap opera as a genre is really about women. At the centre of every soap opera is women, and of course there are men as well. But it is about the lives of women. Coronation Street certainly.
Strong women and
Matrix. There's always a
men.
woman behind the bar and the Queen Vic. These are really important elements of these shows, and stories, time immemorial, stories written about women and by women and for women have been sneered at. And so soap opera is no different. And so, in conclusion, snobbery about soap opera is snobbery about its audience. And I have no truck with it at all, because its audience is large and passionate and among the most engaged audiences of any sort of genre of television in the world. They're very passionate about their characters. They'll tell you when you fuck it up, and they'll tell you when you're doing it well. Well, they will, won't they?
Now that we have Twitter, we're lucky enough to have Twitter.
Very instant that you went from okay to terrible.
Actually, last year, Shortland Street, for the first time, won, in our version of the BAFTAs, the best script. It was the first time in its 34-year history. And I wrote it. Yay! Woo! And when I did my speech, I got up and my acceptance speech, and I said, can everybody here please put a hand up who's been part of Shortland Street? And pretty much the whole room. And I've noticed, listening to all the speakers here, everyone's mentioned soap at some point. Like, do the hands here, who here has had something to do with soap? Like, loads of you. And it's, I feel like that's it, that's exactly it.
Yeah. The thing I've never really understood about the snobbery about soap is this idea that prestige TV isn't soap.
I know.
It's like, I'm sorry, people. Breaking Bad is a soap. It's just a soap with a sociopath at the front of it. Okay.
Game of Thrones is just people talking about their feelings. Two-hander scenes,
and then beheading each other.
Yeah.
It's
like
like
a battle. Do you think he likes me? I don't know if he likes you.
I remember watching television shows back in the 80s when things were properly just one episode offs, and just like something would happen in an episode. I'm just going to use the A-Team as an example because, why not? And it's like Mr. T would get shot and almost die that week, and then the next week it would be like, he's just fine. It's like going, no recovery period. He's grand.
That would be our first ad break on Corrie.
And so
we come back and the helicopter's landed and he's fine.
But that always seemed weird to me, even as a kid. And so when I became a grown-up, and I started watching soaps. Like I used to watch Days of Our Lives in the afternoon with my grandmother, and it would just continue from day to day to day to day to day. And I was going, that makes sense. He got shot yesterday and he's still in the hospital 6 episodes later. He should be there. Yeah. And so when TV started, like Hill Street Blues and stuff like that, when they started to kind of put that into prestige TV, I remember that happening and just going, well, this is just soap with a bigger budget. I love this. And so I still, whenever someone comes at me with that snobbery, I always say, I was like, really? Are you watching House of the Dragon? Soap.
And also in the
soap
States,
like a motherfucker.
And in the States, of course, the soaps were daytime show, General Hospital, Days of Our Lives, etc. Touched by an Angel. Was it Touched by an Angel?
Loved all of those.
Yeah, but are you telling me Desperate Housewives wasn't a soap?
the purest.
I mean, with
So pure.
four threads every single. We have 4 threads every episode. They have 4 threads every episode. Strong women, useless men. Check. You know, it's the same thing. Same thing, right? Bigger budget, same thing.
It wasn't called Desperate Husbands, people. No. We know why we were watching that show.
I mean, what I love there is that was literally one of the questions on my list, and you just went to it automatically.
My bad.
No, that's fantastic. So, what I did want to ask next was, do you ever, and kind of, you know, building on from that question about snobbery, do you ever feel like you get pigeonholed as a soap writer? Are you totally comfortable writing in the soap space, or have you reached, you know, are you trying to do bigger, or are you doing bigger and more prestige stuff? And has your reputation as a soap writer, or that notion of being pigeonholed, had any impact?
Personally, I don't care if people pigeonhole me as a soap writer. It's like, and big whoop.
You can't control how other people see you.
Yeah, no, right. And it's like, I'm proud to be a soap writer on top of that, you know? I am doing bigger things, but I'm gonna tell you right now, it's like all they are is it's like, it's an 18th century crime drama set in Dublin, but it's a soap. you know, it's a detective show, but it's a soap. It's like, that's just what it's like. I like stories that continue. I like things that, you know, that don't just sit in a space for an hour and then the next week it's a whole different thing. I like the whole thing about television for me, why I actually prefer television to movies now, is I like that big canvas. I like watching things like The Wire, where things pay off 5 years down the line. So yeah, it's like, I don't think it's been a problem for me, but if it has, I haven't noticed it. Which either means I'm just, you know, not paying attention, or I just don't give a flying F. One of the two.
Either is a good thing.
You know?
I know I've had conversations with my agent about you should, since you're not doing so much EastEnders now, we should be pushing you into other things, and that might mean saying no. At some point, saying, okay, I'm not going to write for EastEnders anymore, and cutting it off, even if they offer, and saying no, and because then if you still have it there, you won't commit to the other things. So she's been pushing me to do that. Something else I've noticed, in Australia, we're behind the States, but we're getting there in terms of putting writers at the centre of television shows in a showrunner role, or whatever role it is. There's been a growing awareness that when you get a former soap opera writer in that role, they have an understanding of production that a lot of other writers just don't have, because with EastEnders, there are no producers on EastEnders, so you're a script editor on EastEnders, and you're on the floor every day, so you're talking to directors, you're in those meetings.
We also know how to take notes, right?
Yeah,
because you're doing it every single time.
When you're writing your script, you're getting notes, and it's like, here's 12 pages of notes on your 4th draft. We're turning the cameras on Tuesday, so you've got 4 days to do it. So there's a pace to it, but just an understanding of the realities of television production. Where you point a camera, how much something's going to cost. If you go, if you write one scene at a fun park, that's moronic, because you're going to move your whole thing there for one scene. Just that understanding, which is very basic understanding, but a lot of writers who haven't got that production experience didn't have. And so we should think about soap opera as giving people that.
I think I agree with that. I was reading an article the day before yesterday, and this kind of blew my mind at the time. Is anyone watching Industry at the moment?
Yeah.
Okay, so apparently the third I haven't watched it yet, I'm going to be honest. I'm planning to, I just haven't gotten to it. Apparently the 3rd season of Industry has kind of blown up and become this massive thing. And the 2 guys who created the show were doing an interview where they basically said that they had no idea how to write a TV show for the first 2 seasons. That's why the first 2 seasons weren't as good. They kind of laughingly went, yeah, the HBO just let us have kind of like on-the-job training to figure out how to make a TV show. And I just kind of was reading this and just going, what? What? It's like, you didn't know what you were doing, and they just let you learn at $1 million an episode. I was like, well, I'd like to get some of that on-the-job training personally, but like I said, a soap writer wouldn't have needed that. Yeah. They would have already known.
They'd have been good from the start.
Yeah, we'd have been watching from season 1.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's quite a little different in New Zealand because we have one soap. So no one can be pigeonholed as a soap writer because that's it.
You're a
Everyone
writer.
has to do it, and then you have to do other things as well. And so the pigeonholing, I started at Shortland Street as an actor and then went script writer, storyliner, script editor, script executive now, head writer, and literally that's just because there's no other job to jump to. You know, you are pigeonholed, but also you have to use this, as you're saying, to pay the mortgage, and then also you go off and write other shows and direct and do all the other bits and bobs. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy, like it's different to how you guys explain it.
I've never really thought of it that way. Maybe because I was in the music industry for such a long time. I was in my mid-30s when I came to, I did a couple of Birds of a Feathers. That was a really lucky happenstance that I met Mo and Lo, who wrote it, and they thought, you could be funny, and they gave me a chance, and I wrote an episode, then another, and then I got the Corrie job. At the beginning, to answer your question, I felt so lucky and relieved to be on Corrie, and it was such good fun. And another thing that's underestimated is you become, it sounds so schmaltzy, but you become a family because we go to conference every month for 3 days a month. It's not much, but various people have been through weddings and marriages and births of children. Of course, how can you not? You know, I've known some of the cast all that time I've been on the show. We've seen casts die, and we've seen new ones come on board. That's very underestimated on soap. It's like a proper job in that way, that you genuinely have feelings for your teammates. So that's another great lesson. But I think that, what was the question again?
Being pigeonholed.
Yeah,
pigeonholed.
Being pigeonholed. Yeah, at the beginning of my career, so when somebody would say, oh, great, I got one of my favourite jobs was they asked me to script edit a show called Getting On with Joe Brand and Joe Scanlon and Vicky Pepperdine. I don't know if you know that one. What an opportunity, you know, one of my favourite shows. I'd seen the first 2 series, happened to meet Vicky and Joe in a party, and a friend of mine, Catelyn Moran, kind of, she knew how much I loved it. She didn't get me the gig, but we were so amusing together and pissed that eventually got this job on the show. So in a way, I think a lot of, in that case, and I did an episode of Benidorm, sometimes when a show is in a bit of trouble or a script needs punching up or something like that, I found my friend, one of my best friends, Jonathan Harvey, a playwright and writer, is also on Corrie. Sometimes we get similar calls, which is we desperately need this script punched up and we need it in 5 days. Do you think we could do it? Or this script, it needs more gags. Do you think you could? So in a way, is that so bad to be pigeonholed? As I say, they know that you're fast and you're good and you're funny, and you can show them 6 episodes that you've done. In fact, they can watch it that night on television. You don't even have to send them your script or a CV. You just say, watch tonight, and you'll see. And they go, it's great. And the morning you get a call, say, do you want the job?
It's the story head as well. You've got this, they chew up story, these shows, so quickly that we found this with the show that I'm working on in Australia, where we get soap writers in. You might get someone out of screenwriting school who wrote an amazing short film, but when it comes to putting scenes on the board, actually we come in here, we got nothing. We've got to go out with 20 scenes today. That the soap writers have that muscle where they're like, okay, we're bullshitting now. This is waffle. Stop saying that, because we've only got 2 scenes and it's 11 o'clock. So we need more scenes, more. I just remember soap writers, when I was doing The Heights, standing at the board with a whiteboard marker saying, shut up, more scenes, more scenes. And the soap writers are the ones who can put them up there.
And I think the other thing, talking about that thing, is say younger writers are, which is obvious, write about what you know. Of course, most people start with that at the start. But when you're writing on soap, I've got to be able to write authentically an 8-year-old girl, an 8-year-old battle axe, a woman who's recently come out as lesbian, a disabled man. That is very different from writing my story that no one's interested in. You're writing stories, you're writing everyone's story. You're getting inside your grandmother's head, you're looking at your nephew or niece or your daughter, and you're trying to soak up everything and thinking, well, let me think from that point of view, rather than thinking, and there's nothing wrong with that, it's my story, but you're never going to be writing from all these different people's points of view every single episode. It's not a protagonist and everybody else around him or her. It's you've got to be in that particular character, no matter how different they may be from your experience. That's a fantastic to be able to do that and to learn how to do that is invaluable, not just for your career, but I think as a actual, as a human being, it's great to have a bit of empathy for other people, and soap teaches you how to do that, I think.
And for so long. Like, we have, you've been writing for 30 years, you said?
20? How old do you think I am?
Sorry, 20 years. And so you've been with these people, these characters, for that long, and the setup, and one of the advantages of soap is, like you said, the lead in so long, we've got the setup. So one of our characters has had a suicide attempt, and we set it up for 6 months. And so slowly, finally I just saw the episode in a screening, and I was in floods, because I was like, fuck, sorry. Okay, good.
I love crying on my own scripts.
Bloody Antipodeans. I can't take it.
You're well behind me on the swears, so don't even try.
But like you're writing all of these characters, and you're with them. They're part of your body, your soul. Like, you spend so much time in these characters' heads, years and years.
I feel in 20 years' time, you could wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, we need 2 pages of Carl and Susan bantering in the coffee shop about something, and I'll be able to do it. The way they talk is so in my marrow now.
You almost can't help it.
No, I can't.
You can't help it.
I've had that note before. You can't help yourself, can you?
Well, you can't, but you can't help writing in that voice, because you've heard the voice so fucking often, and it's like, Carla Connor, the Ali King who plays that, is a great friend of mine, but her voice is so unique, and she plays a certain kind of very sympathetic. She came in as a kind of a bit of a villain, a kind of a bitch, but the way that writers build and then build and then build and then build, and suddenly you've got a very three-dimensional character that, again, you might not have in a kind of a single-strand drama, because they reacted like we all do. They react to things differently. They soften, they harden, they react to circumstance. That's real life. That's what we mustn't lose from soap, the idea that somebody can change, and people do, but then they can revert again and they can change back. As long as you're not stretching, we always say around the table, we can make them do anything. We just got to make the audience believe it, because that's true of real life. People don't remain the same all the time,
Absolutely. So we're going to open up to questions from the audience very shortly. But before we do, I just wonder if the panel have any advice for people in the room who, having listened to us all talk about how much we love writing on soaps, are starting to think, hey, that might be something I want to do. Carl, I'm going to start with you.
Why would you do that, Jennifer?
Because I love you dearly.
I don't know what to say, because I fell into soap. I literally met, I think it was the husband of the woman who was the story producer for The Bill at a party. We got really, 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 really hammered and talked about a load of bollocks. And then the next day, she called me and went, "My husband says you'd be a great fit for The Bill. Would you like to come in and have a chat?" And I was like, "Great, sure." What's The Bill? Yeah. Thank God for ITV4. It's like crash course. So I honestly don't. I guess the only advice I have is just always be writing. And I mean, it's like because when you get in, especially if you do get in a soap, Jesus, there's no time lapse. It's like it is when there were days. And Jennifer will remember this. There were days, I remember, in that writer's room where we were there from 9 in the morning till 4 in the morning. I literally went home.
Call the Writers Guild. This is not right. Where's Gail Renard?
I know. Where was I when I needed me? We were there. We were there till 4 in the morning. Sometimes I would go home, have a nap, come back. Sometimes in my jammies, but we won't go into that. And it was nonstop. But I'm not going to complain about it because I loved it. I loved being in that world with those characters, and I loved writing all the time. It's like it's a rare thing to be able to do that every day, all day, and be rewarded for it. So yeah, it's like that's why I love soap. It's like because I'm always writing.
Love it, Peter.
I get heaps. Obviously, lots of people ask me how do I get onto Neighbours or onto EastEnders or whatever. There's a temptation. I see this a lot that because Russell T Davies was on Brookside, whatever he was on, Corey. Yeah, and all these great writers have got soap on their CV. That it is just a way station you have to pass before you become good and famous. And so I've just got to tick that neighbour's box and go on to something else. That is the wrong way to approach it.
Absolutely.
These shows have been around for a long time because they're good at what they do, and what they do is for all the shows is different, but they're good at what they do. And writing for them is not just a box that you tick. The reason Russell T Davies is a great writer is not because he just checked the box on the soaps that he worked on, but because he's skilled enough and committed enough to give his absolute best self to those jobs and produce wonderful scripts for those shows. That's what it's about. If you go into a show thinking I'll just tick this box, you write shit scripts and you'll never go on. So you would have no idea how many people come to me and say, how do I get a job on Neighbours? I'm like, cool, just what's your favourite story at the moment? I don't watch it. Like, well, go away, spend 6 months watching it and
Leave
understand it a
now.
little bit.
And how insulting.
And how insulting. It is. It's like I used to be, well, maybe you should watch a little bit of it. And now I'm like, stop.
It'd be a good start.
Just don't waste, not, I don't care about my time. Don't waste their time. They've got people who love this show, watched it for 30 years. When I was at EastEnders, people would literally come in to interview for jobs and say, I've seen every episode of EastEnders. I remember when Den kicked in the door in episode 1, I watched it with my mum and my nan, and I've watched everyone since. I've never missed one. I'm like, great, that's a good start. But to not be, you don't have to be that extreme.
That's the fundamental first
step. You've got to
step.
love it.
You've got to know it better than the next person. I think that charms, certainly in my case, charms the producer. You remember things they don't remember. They think, and you can't really fake enthusiasm. You can. It's like
doesn't
sex.
necessarily make them
People
good.
notice. I think you can't really fake loving something because, especially if it's been on for 64 years, they can trip you up. Anyway, this goes back to the previous point, doesn't it? There isn't that many places to go now. When there used to be, let's say in England, I'm from Wales, we have Pobl y Cwm, but in England itself, you probably went down from about kind of 8 to 10 shows. Channel 5 was great. They had Neighbours and Home and Away and Dream Team and Mile High. ITV had The Bill and it had Corrie and it had Emmerdale. It's frightening when you think how many have gone by the way. So my advice is just don't come for my job. Do what you like. Just don't come for my job. I ain't going nowhere.
And my advice, similar to echo what you guys also don't come for my job, but to echo, I think it's care. But I get so many young writers approaching me or new writers, and I've definitely had emails of going, I think it would be really good for my CV if I worked for Shortland Street. I'm like, good for you, that's lovely. But people who come in and have watched the show and also can write, that helps. But because with soaps we're going to be doing so many bloody episodes, I need to like you as a person if I'm going to be working with you.
That's true of any job. I think in my experience I've done many different things, and being likeable, again, difficult to fake, but that is it, because you're going to be spending a lot of time with each other, Nobody wants an arsehole on the team who's going to be winding everybody up or anything else. So it does teach you teamwork, which is, again, something very valuable for writers who often are in their lonely garret, if they're not on a team show like that, not knowing if anybody's taking any notice of them, which is a horrible feeling. I'm sure we've all had that, was at least you're in production, at least your name's coming up on screen, at least you're... and the one thing I would advise if you are going for one of these jobs or anything else, always go in with a couple of pictures, because really it's all they care about, because the material, if you're on 3 hours a week like we are every single week of the year, it eats up. So if you come in just with 2 or 3 great pictures that you've really thought about, really simple, really true to the character, or completely unexpected direction, that's liable to get the job more than familiarity with the job, ideas for how to go forward. I think those two, I'd say, are the 2 key things if it was going to impress a producer, in my experience anyway.
Brilliant. I think that is some really excellent advice. I'm also thinking I really want all of us to be in a soap writers' room together. Yes. Because that would be fun. So we have time for just a couple of questions. Was that a hand going up in the second row?
I wondered how you define a soap opera. What's the definition?
No, I mean, I think the definition is that it is
continuing
long-running
drama. They
continuing.
never call it soap at at the higher echelons. We're continuing drama.
Can I add something to this? Because in Germany, a soap is a daily drama. So we air
Same
an
in the
episode.
States.
Yeah, so we air an episode every day, like 5 days a week, and that's a soap. And I think you just said like 3 days a week, right?
It used to be 5 and now it's gone down to
it's
3.
gone down.
We used to be 5 days a week, but it was all over the schedules. Like it was at 7:30 and 8:30 with the Trevor McDonald in the middle. And you're like, what? And then Friday it would have 2 with something else in the middle. Then sometimes we had a Sunday. We've gone to 3 a week, which are an hour. So we're doing 6 half hours in the format, Christ knows why, of 3 hours at 8 o'clock on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So we're doing more than 5 episodes in a week.
Yeah, we do that too. I've been on one a few years ago. We wrote 8 episodes a week. So they were able to cut the budget, and we would have the summer off. And so we had to write, the writers' room had to write 8 episodes a week. That was
I think
insane.
a daily drama is probably going to be a soap. I also think there's a style of storytelling in a soap opera that varies from country to country, but is generally about, not always about women, but is generally about women and intergenerational
and domestically
families
based.
And domestically based.
Except my one's totally different.
Yours is a medical one, but with still
domestic
continuing
or
stories.
workplace really are the two options, aren't they?
I mean, I guess the bill was a police drama, but also a soap. So I guess you can. So I'm not sure exactly how.
It's those relationship stories.
There were, I guess
I think anything that's on more than once a week is sort of
continuing.
considered a soap, isn't it? If it's on more than once a week rather than like an hour.
But then again, like we were saying, I wouldn't. Game of Thrones is not a soap, but there are definitely elements of soap storytelling in Game of Thrones. Like I know there's big battles and dragons and all that shit, but there's also
affairs.
There's also affairs and family relationships and people worrying about if someone likes them or not and what that means. And
I
that's
think it's
very soapy storytelling.
Agree. I think it's also about the ensemble that you were talking about earlier, Damon. It's having 16 archetypes wherever you set them, and watching them work through their daily lives.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also with archetypes, you realise quite soon, don't you? We don't need 2 of these. We've accidentally ended up with 2 people who are very similar, or they might not even be similar, but they serve the same purpose in story terms or reaction terms. So you would never need 2 Ina Sharples. It would be silly, you know. You wouldn't want 2 Deirdres, you know. So I think that's the other thing. You know, we've got a cast of 80, a regular cast, which still, it's crazy, right? And they're constantly saying, let's bring it down, and there's obviously natural ways that happens by people leaving or whatever. But you still also need to bring in new characters to fuel some stories. You can't just have all our characters never meeting anybody ever that they've never met before. You know. So that's a problem because then they get popular. You've got to add them to the cast, and then you've got to think. 80 still seems to me enormous, you know. So sorry, that was me.
I'm glad you didn't die.
Okay, I think we have time for just one more question. If anybody has a question, yes.
Is there? I mean, it doesn't sound like maybe there is, but is there any space for someone to like create a new soap, or like how hard do you think that would be?
Well, we did one in Australia a few years ago. One called The Heights. There was a gap. We'd identified a gap at the ABC for a returning. We were doing twice a week. We started a returning show, and they scheduled it very poorly. And so it didn't find the audience. Didn't find a great audience, but they didn't give it the best chance to find the audience. But the model was there, and then very frustratingly, it was very successful on BBC Daytime in lockdown. Did really, really well. There were 60 episodes by the end. Did really well BBC Lockdown. After we'd sent all our sets to the tip and the show was pretty much finished. I know. So it was really pop. If that had happened a year earlier, we might have got more money from BBC and they could have got it going again. But I think there is room. That was the shot in Australia. You won't get another shot at that for a while. But the reason that was qualified successful was that the production company had identified that the ABC had a gap and they wanted something to bring talent through. Off-screen talent, crews, everything, and they had a diversity problem at the ABC, and this was a show that was custom built to fix that problem for them, or at least go some way towards addressing it. So it was a very strategic move by the company to get it there, and then it was a good show. Just didn't find its audience, unfortunately.
I think ITV tried one called Night and Day, which was so ambitious, which was so silly that they had the first half of
About
it.
20 years ago? Is that the
The first half of it was set in the day.
Yeah.
But I think the first half of it was behind the scenes at a soap, like It Will Be Us. And then the second half was the soap itself. Jason Donovan was in it, I think. Mike Baldwin, Johnny Briggs was in it. There were lots of people that had been sacked or had left other soaps who all, and it was so nuts, and it didn't last very long. It's a kind of
cast a
bizarre
long
idea.
shadow though, because I remember watching it and going, "This is the most
campest
bonkers thing I've ever seen."
But I think, I don't know, but I suspect if ITV planned that, I think it would be much, much bigger than one writer coming to the commissioner and saying, what do you think? I think it would be a whole, I've been sort of involved in discussions about this sort of thing. It would be a case of a channel reaching out to producers, don't you think, and to writers, and the producer bringing writers along, and you probably have a big room of clever, experienced people deciding that this is never going to fucking work because all the rest of the soaps are, really struggling to find a play. I wonder if it'll all settle. Either the streaming thing has taken over and there will be no BBC anymore, or ITV linear, it'll all be online, which I suspect even BBC and ITV themselves say that is probably 2.5 to 3 years away, or whether soap will be one of those, one of those genres that survives because there's a certain hardcore that do enjoy watching something as Carter every single day or every single night. So we don't know. All we can do is write keep writing as best as we can.
Make it good.
Well, that's also interesting because in terms of the economic climate that everyone's talking about, we make 250 episodes a year on the smell of an oily rag. Yeah. And everybody is wanting content. So I think there's space for soap operas, and I think you're right. I think it would have to be a channel reaching out for a specific soap opera, but I think I'm interested to see how, world events affect what's being made, and as you say, as things settle with the streamers, if that will have an effect.
I mean, when you think that the new EastEnders set cost £90 million, 90 million
seems a lot.
It seems a lot, doesn't it? For license fee, license payers' money, and you think, well, they can't cancel it, can they? Because they can't possibly, because the economics of it would be even more disastrous than keeping it going.
They would they've got to run it for 10 years after that.
So you've got no choice. I mean, otherwise you just look like you've spunked a shitload of money. Sorry, can I say that? How rude. Spaffed all that money against the 90 million quid. I mean, it seems quite, I do all right, but 90 million quid.
You could have built a bike rack for that.
That is a very niche Irish joke, Carl. But that might also be the perfect place to leave this panel. So, Carl, Peter, Damon, Jessica, thank you so much. That was a fantastic conversation.
Thank you.
The Power of Stories panel delved into how screenwriters harness the power of narrative to address pressing issues such as climate change, social injustice, and political upheaval. Gain insights into the intersection of art and activism as we analyse the impact of screenwriting on shaping public consciousness and inspiring action towards a better future.
Good afternoon to everybody. You're very welcome to the next panel, which, as you can see, is a very catchy title, The Power of Stories and the Stories of Power. My name is David Donoghue. I'm the chairman of Screen Producers Ireland, which is the representative organisation for independent producers in Ireland. I'm not a screenwriter, but I'm thrilled to be here, and I have with me an excellent panel. I'll begin with Mariana Wendt, who is right beside me here. Each of them will introduce themselves in a moment. Mariana is from Germany, and then there's Terry George, who is from Ireland, and Nicola Guadagnino, who did I pronounce it? Give me the
But no, my English, no, my last name is very difficult in Italian too. I have a collection of all the journalists that they did a mistake with my last name.
then
And you did it now. And you're now in my collection.
So, instruct
It's
me.
a Guaianone. Try to repeat.
Say it again.
Guaianone.
I think it'll be Nicola.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Nicola. And
You can call me O.
I'm sorry to add.
In the Roman style. O.
Okay. So obviously, Nicola, Terry, and Mariana come from widely diverging backgrounds, but they are all highly successful in their fields, writing and producing and directing. So I would like to turn first to Mariana. Mariana, can you give us some idea of what motivated you to get into writing to begin with, to get into storytelling in film or TV? What was the background? What excited you about getting into this business?
Actually, I started not in the film industry, but in the theater, first as a dramaturg and then as a director, directing plays written by other writers. And suddenly I realized I'm very much into telling my own stories, and I started to do these kind of collage projects, and suddenly realized that if I really want to tell my own stories, I have to write them myself. And this was the moment when I was changing, trying to get in the film industry, doing another studies for screenwriting, as well as a producer master's degree, and this is where I am right now.
So you began with writing, with storytelling right from the beginning. I mean, it was really part, when you were first working in theatre, already at that point you were...
No, in the theatre I just was directing other people's stories, and then there was a period when I did both, trying to write and to direct in the theatre, and then I suddenly realized I have somehow to decide, because being in two industries, standing on the premiere in the theater and then trying to get to know the people in the film industry, it was too much, because in Germany it's very like two different worlds, and people from the theater back then, they thought, TV industry is like something they don't want to touch because it's not art, it's like... Yes. And the other way around, and so I had to decide, and I decided to go for the film.
For the film,
yes.
And I mean, the German-speaking world will know about your work, but when you, for the wider audience here, could you give an overview of what you have done?
Yes, I started mostly with crime, because in Germany, crime is the thing the Germans really love. I mean, 80% of the content which is created and filmed in Germany is crime stories. And I worked for a long time as a head writer of German crime story. And then when the streamers came into the European market and everybody made long-running premium content series, I had the luck to work on my own. In the last 8 years, 3 series I created, which are all drama series. The last is drama with a little bit of crime, but mostly drama. So the first one was a limited series I created together with Edward Berger, Eden. It's about the European refugee crisis. Yeah. It was aired like 6 years ago, maybe. And then I worked on a show which is called Neumatt. It's produced by the SRF, the Swiss television, and was the first Swiss series which was bought by Netflix, licensed in 190 countries. It's New Heights. It's about a farmer's family drama, and this family is caught in between city and countryside, trying to save their farm and trying to solve the problems they are faced because of the globalized agricultural economic situation. And it's a kind of very dysfunctional family, which over the arc of 3 seasons comes together again as a family, and they kind of find their identity, but they lose the farm. Because in this globalized economical system, it's not possible anymore to survive. This is the idea of the series. And the last series I did, it premiered this year. It's called Wer wir sind, who we are. It's about young activists, climate activists, being in conflict with the parents, and it shows the rifts between poor and rich and young and old and and left and right.
Yeah.
So very contemporary.
No, that's very powerful work. And in fact, from my own experience of Germany, I know that the Krimi, as it's called, the crime story or crime program is really central. I mean, it is what German TV audiences almost expect every single evening. I can imagine that you, it was a great place to cut your teeth in, but obviously you were able to get beyond that. If I may, I move to Terry. Terry, you're, dare I say it, a kind of household name in Ireland. You've been responsible for some superb films, both with Irish background and with international background. But look, can I leave it to you to tell us how you got into this business? What motivated you?
I got my start in theatre and film in a men's bathroom in a theatre in New York. I was attending a play called A Couple of Blackguards, and at the halftime I went to the men's bathroom, and in the next stall was Jim Sheridan. And we had a conversation about the play, and A Couple of Blackguards went on to be...
Side by side in the men's... I don't want to go into the details.
What do you think of the play? Blah, blah, you know, Jim.
I do know, Jim.
And A Couple of Blackguards became Angela's Ashes, the best-selling book and film. And at the end of the play then, I said to Jim, I have a script about a prison escape in Belfast, which he ended up not only producing, but acting in the lead, because the lead actor decided it wasn't worth the trip from Connecticut to New York to put on. That play ran for 6 months. Then Jim went off. He came to me and he said, I'm going off to Dublin to do a script about Christy Brown, to which I said, a drunken Irish paraplegic, that'll be a big hit. That became My Left Foot.
Yes.
And while he was away, I ran the Irish Arts Centre in New York. And while Jim was doing My Left Foot, I wrote the script I met Jerry Conlon and began the script for In the Name of the Father. So I kind of jumped straight from theatre, from like this 40-seat theatre on 11th Avenue till the Academy Awards. It was like
amazing.
That. But and then Jim and I went on to do 3 films together. We did In the Name of the Father, which he directed and we co-wrote. I directed a film called Some Mother's Son, which was about the Bobby Sands hunger strike. And then we co-wrote The Boxer with Daniel Day-Lewis, which Jim directed again. I then began working in television and film in America. I did a TV series called The District, a Vietnam War film called Bright Shining Lie. And then I learned of a story about a hotel in Rwanda. I went and met the hotel manager in Brussels. I went back with him to Rwanda, discovered the story, and I wrote, directed, and produced Hotel Rwanda. And since that time, I've been doing more, mostly political, humanitarian scripts and films and some television. My daughter and I did a short film in my house in Northern Ireland, or north of Ireland, and with most of our family, called The Shore, which was basically about the reconciliation of 2 people who had broken up during the Troubles and re-met 27 years later under strange and quite funny circumstances. And The Shore won the Academy Award for Best Short Film in 2012. So I've tried to concentrate on basically, humanist stories about individuals who find greatness in trying to help their fellow man or woman. Yeah, so that's it.
No, it's a fascinating story, and I mean, obviously you worked closely with Jim Sheridan, Terry, but you also went out on your own, in effect. I mean, with Hotel Rwanda. So, I mean, did you find that writing and directing and producing together were satisfying, or were they? I mean, was it an experience that you liked, or would you prefer to be just doing the writing?
No, I actually don't like writing. I find it painful. And with Sheridan, with a partner that you trust, it's relatively easy, because Jim particularly will tell you something shit within 10 minutes of reading it. And you can then, if you trust that person, you then move on. Whereas yourself will believe it's wonderful for at least 2 weeks, or until someone tells you it's shit, or until it gets made and you see it on screen and you say, well, that was terrible. So that part of it I enjoyed with Jim. Writing on my own I find harder, but the directing side of it I love, because it's a social event and you're putting your own words on screen.
And The Promise, which you did,
Yes.
that was, you wrote it and directed, did you?
I rewrote a script, yeah. The Promise was
about the
a
Armenian
story set
genocide.
during the Armenian genocide, which I rewrote and then directed. Huge budget, $100 million, put up by one person. And it wasn't the most controversial thing I did. The Hotel Rwanda was which I thought was the easiest sale, became the most controversial. But The Promise invoked the ire of the Turkish government, to the extent that they made an opposition film called The Ottoman Lieutenant, which told the polar opposite story of how basically this Turkish lieutenant was a wonderful guy. So I mean, I think that
and that was not funded by Kerkorian.
No, it was funded by Erdogan. Erdogan's son made the film.
Yeah.
Brought it out just before we released The Promise, and then there was a huge campaign of disinformation around The Promise. So, yeah, I've been in the wars with some films. Yeah.
Yeah. Great, Terry. I'll move on to Nicola. Nicola, can you describe your own career to date? What gave you the idea to get into film making, but also writing?
Yeah, I was too lazy to become a director and too shy to become an actor. And I thought, oh, maybe a screenwriter can be a good compromise.
Yes.
You have the luxury of to write in underwear in your living room, or organize your bookshelves in a compulsive way, like me. I don't feel guilty. You can procrastination. You can live in procrastination. That is fantastic, because writing, 90% of writing is a way to write. And then I started to write, and I was lucky enough to meet this guy. It was a great Italian screenwriter, Leo Benvenuti. He wrote many movies, many Italian comedy, Once Upon a Time in America with Sergio Leone. And I remember that seminars Friday night was like to stay in the Florentine craftsman in the 16th century. Yeah. It was like a bottega, and we worked on this project. And Leo was my mate. I'm doing that thanks to him, because I studied law. All my family was a lawyer. Yeah. And then I started to write the dialogues for soap opera. I wrote a lot of shitty TV series for Italian TV, until I wrote my first movie, directed by Gabriele Mainetti. They Call Me Gigo Robot. It's the first Italian superhero movie. It was a big success because it was real. It was not like the superheroes that you can watch in America's movie, but was very tangible. Was a really Italian movie. For example, the first things he does when he gets superpowers, he rip an ATM out of the wall and take it home. So was like very Italian. Yeah. Are you Italian? Just Italian can say that, man. And not you. And after that, I wrote, as you know, my life is like before and then. They call me Gigrobo. I wrote 16 movies. I wrote a series for Netflix, Amazon. I work with great Italian and legendary comedians like Carlo Verdone.
So may I ask, Nicola, you've always felt more comfortable with comedy. Is that right?
No, because in all the movie that I wrote, there is something in common. For example, the relationship with the myths. All my life I had myths. When I started to lose my hair, my myth was Bruce Willis. Because the myths bring take in his back your pain. No, it's more... It's something that can help you, the myths. My myths, when I was young and I moved to Los Angeles for love for a girl that lives there, my myths was Charles Bukowski. Charles Bukowski, the writer. Oh, yes. Yeah. And I remember that one night, I spent all night in the Hollywood, in this bar, Musso Frank Grill, and I was drunk, and I was talking with this guy, the waiters, and they're a very old man. And I said, oh, please tell me. I had 23, yeah? And I said, please tell me something about Bukowski, about my myths. Write something in my notebook. And this is like a cliche, no? When in the US you have a philosophy bartender, no? But it was true, because he wrote on my notebooks, only dead fish follow the streams. And I say, oh yeah, nice, okay, great. After 1 week, I understood that I was the dead fish and Bukowski was the stream, and the meat was the streams. So I understood that maybe you can have meats, but at one time you have to split, to separate from them, no? Yes. And I wrote that this movie, Indivisible, Inseparable, it's a story about two conjoined twins. And one day a doctor told to them, maybe we can share them. But the family, they doesn't want to share them because they are singers, they're famous like a freak.
Oh yes.
And all my life is all around the relationship with the myths and the imagination and the fantasy that can help you to escape from the tragedy of the life. So. In Gigrobo is the same, and then I start. You know that the producer, they wanna. It's like after you have success, it's very hard, no. Then I sold many stories that when I presented them 3 years before, oh no, this story doesn't work. After they call me Gigrobo, oh my God, you're a genius. I want to buy it. Okay, you pay 10 times more now.
And have you found good directors and producers to work with? And have you been?
Yes, no. With They Call Me Gigrobo and The Freaks Out, the second film of the same directors that we were in competition in Venice Film Festival. Yeah, because we know each other when we were young, and then because now I have my production company and all my stories. I wrote many stories that are my original stories. So then it's like I'm executive producer, but creative producer. Mm-hmm. So I can choose the director, the actor, no. But then it's compromise because then he have to shoot the movies. So at the beginning you think, okay, maybe now we have to fight with the director. He has understand what I want to do, but now I'm an old man and I know that you have to find him in the halfway, you know. Sorry for my English. It's fault of my girlfriend because she doesn't want to watch movies with the English subtitles. But we will start, baby.
Well, I learned Italian watching Italian subtitles for John Wayne years ago.
Okay.
My Italian was so poor that I could only go into a John Wayne movie where the dialogue, to be honest, didn't matter that much. But I learned a lot from looking at the Italian subtitles. So
and you was talking about comedy, you know. Now comedy. I love to write comedy, and in your question that I wrote that you emailed us, say okay. what can do a movie for the culture, for the social, no, for the social achievement. And I think that in Italy we had a glorious past with the La Commedia all'Italiana, where we learn how to laugh about our bad manners, our flaws, our fragility. And we did social achievement like the divorce, because if you remember, it's a great movie, Divorce in Italian Style of Pietro Germi, won an Oscar maybe. And we had a law for the divorce thanks to that movie. And so, like Mario Monicelli, another great director, he used to say, it's more easy to change things with the comedy than with the law. And it's true. But now the question is, but now with all this walk wave all around us, and it's like everyone is afraid to offend everyone. I think it's very dangerous for the comedy, and it's very dangerous for our creative freedom. I think that, like Jerry Seinfeld told the same in an interview in the New Yorker a couple of weeks ago, and I think that it's very dangerous for two things. One is cultural and one is social. The cultural is now that we are working, every one of us are working with the OTT, with the streamers, and with all these, it's very striking, read about, oh, you can offend that, you can say that. And I'm asking, okay, they now say us how we have to tell our story. But all the story all around the world is similar right now. It's like to see a McDonald's of entertainment, that you can enter in the restaurant, the same all around the world. And if you see a movie or a series 20 years from now, it doesn't tell our story. And then it's social, because if I can't, like a writer, I have not the freedom to say what our flaws, our idiosyncrasy, our bad manners, the risk is that bad manners stay inside of us forever. The comedy, it's like that you have the king that finally is naked.
I wonder can comedy have that particular power in Italy more than in other countries? Because I remember Roberto Benigni, do you remember they did the wonderful film, his name escapes me, about
La Vita è Bella.
La Vita.
Life is beautiful.
Exactly. Yep. That was a fantastic example of how comedy can be used to make some incredibly serious points about human nature and evil and so on. May I just come to kind of a wider discussion here about really, do we think that film storytelling can actually change society, or is this something which perhaps is exaggerated? Is it something where in fact the reality is a little bit different? Mariana, what has your own experience been?
I think storytelling is the strongest weapon we have, and it has such huge influence that even I think that we as a storyteller sometimes forget how big this word is that we have in our hand, and how big the responsibility is to use it in a right way. Because all these stories have these subliminal messages, and we really have to be careful how to use it. And especially in times right now, I mean, we just had the panel two hours ago, when we really have to choose the words and think about how to come through with our ideas. Because in Germany, for example, we have the commissioning editors, they tell me, the series we did with you about the activists, we wouldn't greenlight it right now. Because it's not the time for this kind of dark, realistic approach. We need much more escapistic stories. Better not to touch serious topics at all.
Do you think 5 years ago there would have been a greater openness.
Definitely.
And it's just right now.
It's in Germany. It's right now, and it has, of course, it has to do with the economic crisis in the whole industry, but as well with the political crisis in Europe, with the right wing coming in front, and people. On the one hand, people who are the giving the money, they are afraid, and on the other hand, we as the storytellers, I think we have to be aware how really to get the people, because if I want to just reach the people which think in the same way I do, I can't tell anything. But if I want to have the people as an audience who maybe have other ideas, it's much more interesting to tell kind of stories of success and stories which empower people instead of just showing what is not working well. And this is what I have the impression in the German industry. There are a lot of people right now thinking about new dramaturgies, new approaches, how to tell stories in a way, especially concerning the climate change, for example, and as well the political topics, so that people feel as humans that they can do things and then they can have an influence and an impact on society, and not just being in this passive mood of they up there, the politicians, they make things wrong, but like to activate the people. And I think this is really our task, what we can do with our stories and what we really should do.
I mean, it's very interesting, but also depressing to hear about the present moment in Germany. I'm sure it's not just in Germany. But do you think that a story is a good way of reaching people more than, say, a documentary film?
Let's give an example with the New Heights series. Of course, it's a story about a family, and it's emotional, and you have the character arcs and everything. But on the other hand, we always try to get on a deeper level. With this, there's this saying: every man is the architect of his own fortune. And we all know that it's not true, that it's this neoliberal idea of which doesn't take account that we don't live in a world which is equal. And so you can see this within the family and the characters of this family. And at the end, they as well understand, and they take their lives in their own hands. And I think this is a really empowering moment if you live with these characters for 3 seasons and you understand with them emotionally, not theoretically, that this message, that it's not that you are a failure if you don't get to a certain success, but it's maybe the outer reasons, or society, or inequality, or whatever, or the system which doesn't allow you to have a small farm which is successful. And these are messages, I think, you even don't have to understand it intellectually, but you feel it within the characters. And this is really strong. It has an impact.
One further question. With the Neumatt series, the one you're describing, which related to the loss of a farm, was there, or has there been, a particular resonance? Have you had a sort of a reaction to that series, which would demonstrate how it was being perceived?
Yes, we had. It's in Switzerland. I mean, of course, on Netflix, you really. I mean, you have this social media, but it's really huge, and you can't really feel the reactions. But in Switzerland, it's very precise, because there is a newspaper called the Bauernzeitung, the farmers' newspaper, and so you really have the farmers reacting, and there you can beautifully see how they perceive for example, the queer aspects of the family, because the main character is gay, how they react on this, and then how they react on the agricultural topics or the economic topics, and they really showed us how they identified and said. And we had tons of letters of them, and we also showed it in the community there. Tried to get in contact with them after the first season then to be able to take topics which they brought up for the second season. So it was really good, really communication. It was really interesting.
That's great. Yeah, Terry, what do you think about the kind of the social or political role of film?
I think it's one of the most important elements we have in society today to influence people, to educate them, to persuade them about, to get inside stories, to get inside events, to tell them what's really going on. And it's with feature film particularly, you have the chance to dig in to character and to their emotions and to what's wrong with them and how they motivate and how they deal with enormous situations. For me, I've always been looking for the ordinary person, usually flawed, who finds greatness in his own humanity in trying to help others. And I think that form of storytelling, which today I fear is being lost. If you look back at film particularly, we understand the Holocaust through Schindler's List and the feature series, The Holocaust on television. We understand the Cambodian genocide through the killing fields. We understand the Chilean counter-revolution through Missing. We understand the Greek Revolution through Z. And for better or worse, we understand the Rwandan genocide through Hotel Rwanda.
And we can add in the name of the Father, we understand the
yeah,
Gifford case. In the Name of the Father changed the peace, the role towards peace, because I know that Bill Clinton, through Ted Kennedy and Senator Dodds, watched that film, and it influenced them. I know for a fact that Hotel Rwanda changed the Darfur situation through George Clooney and Don Cheadle, and believe it or not, the last President Bush, who did more in Africa than President Obama did, and he gave Paul Rusesabagina the Medal of Freedom, which kicked off a hornet's nest of trouble for that film, resulting in the kidnap of Paul Rusesabagina, him being jailed in Rwanda for 3 years. That area of Africa I can't go to because President Kagame runs a whole assassination unit and kidnap unit around there. That film, for better or worse, and we never thought it was going to do anything, changed the perspective on people's, particularly in the United States, where people would come and say, I didn't know anything about this situation. It didn't, I think people were more aware in Europe. Yeah. The Promise kicked off a hornet's nest about the Armenian genocide, couldn't be shown in Germany because the Turkish population there wouldn't accept it. But the influence of these films that we have and television series are so important to educating people because it takes the audience right inside that situation. Now, on Hotel Rwanda, I was criticized because it wasn't gory enough, believe it or not. You know, like you didn't represent how horrific the genocide was. But it was more about inspiring people through what one ordinary, very flawed man could do. Because basically, Paul Rusesabagina was trying to rescue his family. Jerry Conlon was a small-time crook. You know, those are characters. Oskar Schindler, and my big criticism of Schindler's List is that by the end of it, they made him, oh, you know, I gave away the ring for this, and I get this and that. Oskar Schindler was a crook till he died in Argentina, you know. That moment of saving those people is what inspires people, and I think that it's a challenge for us to find stories today that can do that. And the crucial, just the last thing is, though, what's most important about those stories is they have to be entertainment. People are paying euros, dollars, pounds, or whatever to sit in a cinema. You have to entertain them.
That doesn't mean they have to laugh or think the explosions are the greatest thing ever. You have to tap into the emotions. You have to evoke empathy, sadness, anger, rage, laughter. All the emotions need to be put together. If you can do that, you can tell any story in the world. And I think it's the obligation of us here today to fight that fight against the streamers, against the studios, and against everyone else, and try to keep that social activism filmmaking alive.
No. You make that point. You made that point very powerfully, Terry. Do you think that the audience for that kind of filmmaking is still there? I sincerely hope it is. But it's just building on what Mariana was saying a moment ago about, let's say, a kind of a less receptive atmosphere in Germany, that the far right is growing, that people are distracted by other issues. But I would like to think that the kind of audiences whom you bowled over with all of those films, I'd like to think that it still exists, that you can tap into those emotions and get that kind of reaction. But
yeah, no, I do. I believe if you tell a great story, if you write a great... Look, you can write a great script and a bad film can happen from it. As we know, you can't write a bad script and a good film happen. That doesn't happen. Yeah. But if you write a great script that taps into those emotions and you can get it to an audience, they will engage with it. And there's a film at the minute that's the Irish... it's the Irish International Feature Film nominated for the Oscars this year. This film, if you went to pitch it at any studio anywhere, you'd be kicked out the door. Here's the basic story. It's three young men from Belfast, right? They all live in the Catholic, the nationalist part of Belfast. They grew up and learned the Irish language, and they became rappers. They're heavily into drugs, basically coke and ecstasy, right? They hate both the police and the IRA, and they're the biggest, most successful rap group in Ireland at the minute, and there's a film about them. And it's the most anti-woke film. They just curse. There's sex, violence, and rock and roll in this film. And God bless Screen Ireland and for
balaclavas.
Yeah, one of them wears a balaclava permanently. Yeah. And you take that film and how audiences have engaged with it, and it's proof positive that if you write a great story about something that's inspirational, it will find an audience. That's the challenge to us in this room today.
Before turning to the audience, I'd like to ask Nicola, do you feel that, can you show examples of where your work has had a kind of social impact? You mentioned the divorce Italian style then leading to a divorce law, but have you been able to see ways in which your own work has actually had a reaction?
My work, I don't know.
Through comedy.
I'm with him because for me, a movie is first of all entertainment. I don't want to educate people because if maybe today, sorry. Okay, again. So I started to become a screenwriter when. No. For me, the movies is just it's entertainment. I want to have fun, and you have to find the right balance between aesthetic and moral. You know, maybe you have to privilege the aesthetic. No, and it's very dangerous if a movie and it's very pretentious when they give you answers. Maybe it's better to put new questions, and I love when a good movie can change the point of view how you watch your reality, and then you feel maybe better. And but now it's a long time that I don't see a movie that changed something very powerful. I don't know, maybe it's the age, but when I was young, I created big imaginary of stories, and now it's very for me it's very difficult. And the series is like a bulimic crisis that you want to finish and you want to start another one. It's it's very rare that you watch a series twice or 3 times, except for me, The Sopranos. The Sopranos for me is...
I agree.
No? And but the movies really can change not the life of everyone but can change your life in that particular moment of life, no?
Yeah.
And because it's dangerous if you say this movie have to change the mind of the people, because now it's us. Maybe tomorrow is a new Nazis that wanna change our mind.
Well, indeed. With that, can I open up the floor? Are there any comments? Yes, please.
Thank you all for your interventions. I'm not a writer. I'm one of the few non-writers here. I work for a guild, the Guild of Writers Guild of Spain. And I appreciate this panel very much. And my question, or my appreciation goes particularly to Mr. George. I would like to tell you that specifically The Name of the Father changed my life entirely. I was very prejudiced.
Well, thank you.
It's true, it's true. I was very prejudiced about the situation in Ireland. I ended up living in Belfast for a while, even years and years after. And I want to encourage you. I think the vision you shared here is very important. I mean, a story must be honest and must be addressed for people to engage with it. And sometimes I think that's hard to do because there's also stories that you want to tell. And I would like to ask you, how do you choose the kind of stories that you think you want to tell and make them become the story that they actually change people's perspectives?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. Do we have 5 minutes here? Yeah. Could you project that? I was waiting for this question. Okay. Right. So when this panel came up a couple of weeks ago, and I knew what David was thinking about, and I just happened to open the front page of the New York Times, and I was looking down, and two-thirds of the way down, under more news, I saw this. There are 6 films on this page, right? Let's start with the real tragedy, which was Rebecca Chantigi, the marathon runner who just completed the marathon in the Olympics, went home, had an argument with her boyfriend over land. He set her on fire, killed her, and killed himself in the process of setting her on fire. That's a film. How that woman struggled through life to become a marathon runner, what went on in that tragedy that led to that. Now, it's a particularly tragic film, but within her own story, that's a film. Next, over here, Trump says his son, Barron, is attending NYU. Son of right-wing dictator goes to the most liberal university in New York. What happens, right? This is a great one. Pope finds fervent fans among Indonesia's transgender community, right? Transgender man wakens up one morning, discovers his private parts have changed, and wants Pope Francis nominated as a saint. But here's my favorite. The bands and the fans were fake. The $10 million was real. A guy called Mike Smith in North Carolina created his own bands on the internet, on Spotify. They were called like Chaotic Ambush and Atomic Explosion, and he created 20 bands. He wrote music for those 20 bands. He then created the bots that subscribed to those 20 bands, and over the period of 5 years, he made $10 million. And they're charging him with fraud now. The guy should get a medal for using the internet. Can you imagine the amount of work that has to go into that to do that? So, yeah, and I think there's another one that, oh yeah. Oregon hospital sued after fentanyl was swapped with water. What went on there? So just to answer your question, all of those possibilities, if you dig into them and find, you could explain to a world audience just Donald Trump through his son going to NYU and finding love with a Marxist or whatever, you know? So that's where I find my stories. I look through that stuff. Now, getting from the page to the screen is a whole other story, but I encourage everyone to dig into the reality of each day. We don't need to go to Mars. We don't need the Marvel stories. We don't need guys flying through the air whose rubber arms are 20 foot long or whatever. They're all there on the page.
So you'll be a busy man for the next 15 years then.
I'll be watching these films, not right. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you for the question.
Any other comments, questions, challenges? Yes, please.
Hi. I was wondering, because I find it so hard to tackle important issues without becoming, or how should I put it? I don't want to become a narrator who's self-righteous or too moralistic. I don't want the audience to feel that they have to feel a certain way. But at the same time, I'm trying to, you know, make sure that the audience will know where I stand as a filmmaker. So I think that's a thin line. And could you maybe elaborate on that, how you approach your movies, series?
Maybe Mariana, will you try that?
I think I try to be really clear in my approach and attitude towards the topic I'm telling about, but this doesn't necessarily mean that the characters have to express this idea. I mean, the characters can have doubts, they can wander around like this, they can ask questions, and the whole story can ask questions, and the answers are in the head of the audience. So this is, I think, the most important thing, that I don't push my ideas into the movie, but it's just the attitude from where I work, and the characters can have completely different and controversial attitudes toward the same topic.
I think it's finding within the character the emotions you want to convey, and they can be they can be nasty people who have evolutions or whatever. But it's once you start carrying the flag for something, then you run into trouble. But there's another truth about both television and cinema. If you point a camera at someone for 40 seconds and you point the camera at another person for 5 seconds, you've made a biased choice already. The cinema of its nature, it has a bias to it in what you do. And you've got to accept that you're telling a particular story, and that story is there to make people laugh, to entertain them, or to motivate them or whatever. But just know what the emotions are that you want to sell.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Otherwise, I think we're probably running out of time, as it turns out. I don't see anyone. Okay, yes, please.
Just, have there been any times looking back on stuff that you've made where you felt like maybe you missed the mark or got it wrong? And is there anything you would do differently in anything that you've done before?
Yeah, I fucked up the promise for sure. Not just me, but the producers, because we cast we put the 800-pound bear in the B role, Christian Bale, and that immediately upset the apple cart, because the audience were like, "What's the B character doing all the time?" You know, and those sort of things. It was kind of outside my control, but I was well aware of it at the time. Yeah.
Nicola, did you have any particular mistakes that you would look back on?
Mistakes that
Mistakes?
I did?
Yes. Things you would regret?
I don't know, to become a director. You know, because it's the first things when you start to write, and is to be paid for your work. No, that's its first challenge. And at the beginning it was so hard. was like it was like stuck in the all is lost moment with no third act for all, and then you. And then start the real pain, because you have a responsibility, and then you have to talk with the director to find a different vision, to find a unique vision. I don't know if I lived in LA in the 99 in 2000, and maybe if I'll be back, if I back in the past, maybe I will start director school. Now I will going to do my first movie, like a director. But I don't know. Maybe I'll be back in my. I can back in my 20s. I will start to study for become a director.
Yeah. I think you can only see your mistakes all the time. You have to be super critical of your work, all the time. Once you get into the delusion or illusion that something is great, then you're running into trouble right away. That's a brick wall that's going to kill you.
Diana, anything particular that you would regret, or?
Personally, I regret, because when I started in the industry, and I was just lucky that somebody gave me money for writing, and I was so happy, and then I somehow slided in this role of this writing machine, like that the producers tell me what to do, and I thought I have to fill in the vessel somehow. And it's easy in the industry in Germany that people don't treat you like creatives, but just treat you like, yeah, you're the one somehow typing something, and then a script comes out. And I stayed a long time in this position without knowing how to emancipate from this. And it's only with the first series that I started to realize I have a background in directing, I know casting, I know editing, I have a producer's degree, I'm an experienced writer, and I can be a showrunner, and I just need a partner who lets me do it the first time, and really being in control of the vision of what I want to tell, and not being just a typing machine for somebody else's ideas. Exactly. And this is what I think, it took me so long, and the way was really hard to get to this point, not career-wise, but towards my own attitude, and standing there and saying, I know how to do it, and I want to do it. Yeah. So this is what I wished I would have been quicker or earlier.
Yeah, yeah. Always about money. My teacher, Leo Benvenuti, wrote that if you realize that you'll spend less time writing the entire script that the producer will take to write your check, my son, then you'll know you're a screenwriter.
Well, that's a great note on which to finish. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for listening. To find out more about the Writers Guild of Ireland and the work that we do, visit script.ie.